There are places in the jungle where maps don't show and where people never return. We slept next to one of them. I never thought I'd be the one to tell this story, and if I'm honest, I've kept it inside for years. Divers talk about strange things underwater, light that bends wrong, shadows that move even when nothing's there, that sudden bone-deep cold that doesn't match the thermocline. But no one talks about hearing things, at least not the way I did. Lake Champlain has always been a quiet obsession of mine. It's vast, older than the Adirondacks themselves, and it hides layers of history beneath its slate-colored surface. Old ferry routes, forgotten wrecks, sunken cabins left behind when shorelines shifted. But when a buddy of mine on the salvage crew mentioned a submerged village out near one of the drowned valleys, I couldn't shake the image. He said if you dropped down in the right spot, you'd find stone foundations, maybe a silo, maybe even a church. I was between contracts, restless, so I drove my old RV north and set up at a little pull-off that looked over the water. It wasn't a real campground, just a gravel turnout with enough space for 2 rigs and a fire ring scorched black from use. The lake stretched out gray and calm, and in the morning fog, it looked less like water and more like a veil pulled tight over something that was breathing just beneath. The first time I went down, I treated it like any other dive. Weighted belt, double tanks, lights checked, compass clipped. The water was cold, around 50 degrees, and visibility cut in and out like static. Schools of perch scattered as I descended, their silver sides flickering like coins in the gloom. 30 feet down, then 40, the silt thinned and I saw outlines, straight edges where nature doesn't bother with straightness. A wall. Then another. It was a village, just like he said, stone foundations like broken teeth rising from the mud. It was beautiful in a way that hurt. Time had softened it, but not erased it. You could still tell where roads once ran, where a fence must have stood. The lake was holding its breath around it, keeping it in place like a museum no one had ticketed. That's when I heard it. At first, it was faint, like a low vibration through the regulator. A deep tone that didn't belong. I checked my gauges, thinking maybe I was catching some mechanical feedback. Nothing. The tone rose, steadied. It was a bell, a church bell. I knew it in my bones. The long toll that carries through a valley, the sound of Sunday mornings when I was a kid and my mother would drag me to sit in pews that smelled of wax and wood polish. But I was 60 feet under a cold Vermont lake. I froze mid-kick. The sound didn't come from above. It came from below, from the heart of that drowned village. It rolled through the water, dull but steady, and it carried weight in a way sound shouldn't underwater. I felt it in my chest. I don't know how long I hovered there, staring into the haze, my light catching only ruined walls and the glimmer of silt drifting up like smoke. Something about it broke me. I should have turned back. I should have marked it as nitrogen narcosis, the way divers do when things don't add up. But instead, I pushed deeper toward where the sound was coming from. The church was there, or what was left of it, a rectangular footprint of stone, walls half gone, roof long since collapsed. But the steeple, God help me, the steeple still stood, not whole, but tall enough to know what it was. And as I drifted closer, the bell tolled again, deep and slow, as if the lake itself was remembering the rhythm. I don't remember surfacing. I don't remember unclipping my weights or stripping the hood from my head. I only remember sitting on the shore after, shaking so bad my teeth rattled, staring at the water that lay calm and innocent in front of me. That night in the RV, the lake didn't let me rest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that steeple rising through the murk. I heard the bell again, not just a sound, but a pressure, a toll that seemed to shake loose memories I didn't want to revisit. My mother's voice singing off-key in the pew beside me. My father's absence, the way the seat stayed empty even on Easter. The sense that church wasn't about salvation, but about being watched. By dawn, I knew I would go back down. It wasn't curiosity, it was compulsion. When I returned, the water greeted me different. The lake was glass smooth, no wind to ripple it, and when I dropped in, the cold wrapped around me like it knew my name. The village came faster this time, like I'd already been claimed by it. The steeple rose in my light beam, black stone against blacker water. The bell tolled again, louder, longer. And this time beneath the tone I heard something else, a murmur. Voices not in words but in cadence, the rhythm of a congregation answering the call. A sound no diver should hear 60 feet under. I wanted to surface. I wanted to claw my way back up to light, but the lake pulled at me. My fins dragged through thickening water. My arms slowed as if every kick and stroke sank me deeper into memory. I reached the threshold of the church. No door remained, just an arch of stone. Inside, the pews were gone, but the shape of them remained in the silt, depressions where wood had rotted away. My light swept across them, and I swear I saw movement, outlines in the haze, shapes sitting, kneeling, waiting. Then the bell rang again, and the voices swelled. I dropped my light. The last thing I remember clearly was the feeling of being inside, standing where an altar must have been, and the absolute certainty that the congregation had turned their heads toward me. When I woke, I was on the surface. My tanks half empty, my gear scattered across the gravel like I'd ripped it off in a panic. The lake lay quiet, reflecting a dawn sky the color of ash. But from far below, muffled and patient, I still heard the bell toll once more. I didn't leave Lake Champlain that morning. I should have. Any rational person would have driven the RV south, found a diner with strong coffee, and told himself it was narcissus, fatigue, stress, anything but what I'd felt. But the bell followed me. Even after I shut the RV door, even after I ran the heater and tried to drown it out with static on the radio, I kept hearing it. Muffled, patient, like it wasn't ringing for a congregation anymore, but only for me. I walked the shoreline instead, hands buried in my jacket, watching the fog burn off. The lake stretched flat and endless, but I couldn't stop thinking about what lay under that gray skin of water. The drowned village, the church, the congregation that shouldn't have been there. By noon, I had convinced myself of a story I could live with. It was sound refracting strangely through the water. Bells from some church up in Burlington, or maybe an old buoy anchor knocking in the current. My mind had filled in the rest. Divers are trained to distrust their senses below. Depth bends truth. But when I tried to pack my gear, my hands stopped. They actually shook, the way a drunk trembles when he tries to swear off the bottle. I sat there with my mask and fins in my lap, staring at them like they were the only tools that could dig out the truth. So I went back down. The descent felt wrong immediately. The water pressed in harder, heavier, like it wanted me to hurry. The light dimmed faster than before. And then, halfway down, the water grew warmer. Not by much, maybe 5 degrees, but it wrapped around me like a hand. A lake that deep should never warm like that. When I reached the village, the outlines were sharper. The silt seemed cleared away. The walls stood taller, as if the place had been built up overnight. I swam along what must have once been a street, following it toward the steeple. That's when I noticed the carvings, shallow grooves in the stone walls, crosshatches, circles within circles. Some almost looked like writing, though the water blurred the details. I ran my glove over one and felt edges too precise to be erosion. Someone or something had marked this place long after it sank. The bell tolled again, louder now. Not just heard, but felt. The water trembled with it. My mask rattled. I wanted to turn back. I should have. But the street carried me forward, and when I reached the church, I realized the steeple was whole again. Not broken, not half collapsed. It rose complete into the water, as if no century had touched it. My light shone across stone that looked freshly cut, mortar still sealing the lines. Inside it wasn't empty. The pews were there. Every one of them, blackened wood, varnish long gone but standing solid, lined up in rows, and in them sat shapes. Not people. Not exactly. More like shadows cut into the water, silhouettes heavier than silt. They swayed slightly as though the water moved through them differently. I hovered at the threshold, frozen. Then the bell rang again, and every shadow turned its head toward me at once. The water grew heavy with sound. It pressed into my skull, forced itself into my chest. I clutched at my regulator, certain it would tear loose, and that's when I heard words. Not just murmurs this time, but words, clear as if spoken in the pew beside me. Confess. I nearly bolted. My fins struck the stone, sending up a cloud of silt. But the voice followed. Not one voice, but many, layered on top of each other. Men, women, children, all whispering the same command. Confess. Confess what? I didn't know. My lungs burned. My body screamed to rise, to get out before the pressure crushed me. But some other part of me, small, trembling, guilty, leaned forward. The truth was, I did have something to confess. I'd carried it for years, a mistake, one that had cost a man his life. Years back, I'd worked with a salvage crew on the Hudson. We were supposed to check an old trawler, strip it for copper and brass. I cut corners, didn't double-check a harness clip. When the rigging gave way, one of the guys went down with the deck. We pulled him up too late. I told the report it was equipment failure. No one ever knew. But in that drowned church, 60 feet beneath Lake Champlain, I felt that weight drag at me again. The voices pressed harder. Confess. I shook my head, bubbles streaming from my regulator, and forced myself to kick backward. My shoulder clipped the arch. The water shuddered as though the entire building trembled with it. My light swung wildly and caught something glinting in the silt at the altar. A brass bell, small, handheld like a sacristy bell, polished as if someone had rung it yesterday. I lost all discipline. I bolted, shot up through the water in a blind descent, ears screaming, gauges forgotten. I broke the surface, coughing, and tore my mask off, gasping like a man who'd been under for days. The lake was calm, flat, not a ripple where I'd come up. I hauled myself onto the rocks and lay there until my lungs stopped burning. When I finally staggered back to the RV, I thought it was over. But as I peeled off my wetsuit, something fell out of the pocket of my buoyancy vest. It was the brass bell, the one from the altar. I swear to you, I never touched it. I don't remember surfacing. I don't remember carrying it. But it was there, wet and heavy in my palm, the clapper silent as bone. That night, I didn't hear just the tolling. I heard the bell in my RV, not ringing but shifting, moving, as if someone were lifting it, waiting for me to confess. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I shut my eyes, I felt the weight of the little brass bell on the counter of the RV as if it were staring at me. At 3 a.m, I swore I heard it shift. Not ring, not clang, just shift, like someone had picked it up and set it back down. I turned every light on in the rig, sat there with my wetsuit still damp, staring at the bell until sunrise. I thought about throwing it back into the lake, but my hands wouldn't move. It felt like the kind of thing that, once taken, wouldn't forgive being abandoned. By morning, my thoughts had gone raw, frayed at the edges. I told myself I'd do one last dive, just one. I'd return the bell, place it back on that altar, leave it where it belonged, and walk away from this cursed lake forever. But the lake had other plans. When I dropped in, the water swallowed me whole. It wasn't just cold anymore. It was suffocating. Heavy. My limbs dragged as if I were swimming through tar. And as I descended, the world tightened. Visibility shrank until it felt like the water itself was closing around me. The village waited below. But it wasn't ruins this time. It was whole. Streets intact, roofs unbroken, windows still framed. The water didn't touch it. The silt was gone. It looked alive. I should have turned, should have abandoned the bell, let it sink into the muck. But I swam forward, carried by a compulsion I couldn't explain. The church loomed, whole and towering. Stained glass glowed faintly from within, though no light should have reached it. The steeple stretched higher than before, impossibly high, vanishing into gloom. The voices began again the moment I crossed the threshold. Confess. But this time, they weren't just in my ears. They filled the regulator. They crawled down my throat with every breath. I dropped to my knees on the stone floor, clutching the brass bell. My chest heaved. My head swam. The memories I'd locked away for years broke open, spilling into the water. I saw the man on the trawler again, his hands slipping from the railing as the rigging failed, his eyes wide with disbelief as he went under. I saw the bubbles bursting around him. I saw my own hands too slow, too careless, cutting corners to save an hour. And I felt the congregation watching, rows and rows of hollow faces in the pews, waiting for me to admit it. The bell in my hand grew warm. I didn't even know brass could feel warm underwater. My fingers tightened around it until I thought it would brand me. And then for the first time, I opened my mouth. Bubbles surged from the regulator as I screamed through the mouthpiece. Words I hadn't said in years tore out of me, muffled, garbled, but true. I confessed. To the accident, to the man's death, to the lie I wrote in the report. The moment the words left me, the water changed. It thinned, it brightened. For a heartbeat, the pressure eased, and I thought maybe, just maybe, the nightmare was over. But the congregation didn't vanish. They leaned forward, hundreds of shadowed heads bending closer, and for the first time I saw eyes staring from those hollow shapes, empty sockets lit with a faint, pale glow. The bell tolled again. Not the one in my hand, the one above, the great drowned bell in the steeple. Its toll ripped through the water, and it's so powerful my bones shook with it. The pews trembled, the glass quivered, and the congregation rose. They didn't swim, they didn't drift. They stood, feet pressing into stone that shouldn't hold weight. They began to move toward me, slow, deliberate, step by step. I bolted. My fins smashed against the altar. I kicked through the arch and into the street, bubbles blinding me, chest bursting. I didn't look back, but I felt them behind me, rising, reaching, their arms stretching through the water as though they knew I was theirs now. I rocketed upward, desperate. My gauges screamed. My lungs burned with the threat of embolism. But panic drove me harder than training. I clawed for the surface like it was the last thing left alive. When I broke through, the lake wasn't calm anymore. It churned. Waves rose where there'd been no wind. The sky had darkened, clouds boiling out of nowhere. I tore my gear off on the rocks, chest heaving, ears ringing. But I still heard it. Beneath the storm, beneath the crash of waves, the bell tolled, again and again. And then I realized it wasn't just the lake. The brass bell lay beside me where I dropped it. The clapper swung on its own, perfectly in time with the tolling beneath. I left that shoreline in a frenzy. I didn't pack properly, didn't even close half the drawers in the RV. I just drove south, rain hammering the windshield, and I convinced if I stayed another hour I'd drown on dry land. But distance hasn't helped. It's been years now, and I still hear it. At night, in motel rooms, in apartment rentals, even in cities surrounded by noise. That low, patient toll, muffled as if it still comes from under the water. And sometimes when I wake in the dark, I swear I hear the brass bell too. Not in my head, not in memory, but in the corner of the room, waiting, because the congregation isn't done with me. They never wanted my confession. They wanted my place among them. I tried to start a new life after Champlain. I left the salvage work behind, told myself I'd stick to surface jobs, surveying boats, patching hulls, the kind of things that kept me dry. I even sold my old dive gear, every last hose and gauge, as if the act of stripping it from my life would strip the memory too. But it didn't. The bell followed. Not constantly, not enough that anyone else could hear it, but just enough to remind me. It came in waves, sometimes months apart. Always the same, always faint, muffled, like it was ringing from the other side of a wall of water. I'd be in the middle of traffic, horns blaring, and suddenly feel that vibration in my ribs, that low toll shivering through me. At first I thought it was guilt, trauma playing tricks, the way veterans hear gunfire and firecrackers. But the longer it went on, the more I realized it wasn't fading. It was growing stronger. And then came the dream. I was back beneath the water, swimming down the street of that drowned village. The houses stood whole, the windows lit from within. I could see shadows moving behind curtains, families going about their lives. The church rose ahead, steeple perfect against the dark. The bell swung and the congregation filed inside, their faces blurred but their eyes fixed on me. When I woke, my mouth was full of lake water. Not saliva, not the dry taste of a nightmare. Actual water, cold, metallic, heavy on my tongue. I coughed it out onto the pillow, chest heaving. After that, I stopped pretending it was in my head. 2 years later, I returned to Lake Champlain. I told myself it was for closure, that if I went back, if I faced the steeple again, I'd break whatever hold it had on me. But the truth was simpler. I'd grown tired of waiting for the bell to find me in motel rooms, in strangers' houses, in the silence of 3 a.m. I needed to see if it was real or if I'd finally gone mad. The shoreline was the same, that gravel pull-off, the blackened fire ring, the lake spread flat as slate. The same stillness that made you feel like the water wasn't just reflecting the sky, it was watching you. I hadn't brought dive gear this time, just waders, gloves, a flashlight. I told myself I'd only test the water, wade in, see if the sound returned, then leave. But the lake doesn't deal in half measures. The moment I stepped in, the cold knifed through me. My legs locked, but I pushed farther, water climbing my chest, swallowing my breath, and then I heard it. The bell. Not faint, not muffled, clear. One deep toll that seemed to ripple the lake itself. I froze waist deep, staring at the flat expanse of water. No steeple visible, no hint of the village below, but I felt it. Right under me. The drowned tower waiting, and then the water shifted. It didn't move with the wind. There was no wind, but it swelled in a slow pulse, like something vast had taken a breath. The bell tolled again. I staggered backwards, splashing up onto the rocks, my flashlight shaking in my hand. For a moment, the surface stilled, and then, impossibly, I saw it. The steeple, rising, not whole, not solid, but as if the lake had turned translucent, just enough to show the black spire stretching up from the depths. It pierced the surface in silence, dripping water that steamed in the cool air. The bell swung within it, once, twice. And then the congregation surfaced, not swimming, not gasping. They rose upright, shoulders breaking the surface in a wide circle around me. Men, women, children, their faces pale as moonlight, eyes empty but fixed. I ran. I don't remember how I got back to the RV. I don't remember starting the engine. I only remember the headlights catching water dripping down the gravel road as if the lake had followed me onto shore. That was 5 years ago. Since then, I've never gone back to Vermont. I don't go near lakes, don't swim, don't step on a boat. But none of it matters. The bell comes anyway. It comes in bathrooms with dripping faucets, in the hum of air conditioners, in the silence between thunder. It tolls slow, patient, waiting for me to stop running. Sometimes when I'm too tired to fight it, I think about what the congregation wanted. I confessed, and it wasn't enough. Maybe it never was about confession. Maybe it was about invitation, about joining, and I know one day I won't be able to resist. One day I'll hear the tolling and I won't run. I'll follow it no matter where I am. Maybe it'll lead me back to Champlain. Maybe the steeple will rise in the street outside my door. But when it does, I know this much. The congregation will be waiting, and the bell will finally stop calling because I'll be inside. I'll never forget the first time I heard it, that thin, sharp whistle that seemed to cut through the night like it had been carved out of silence itself. It wasn't a tune, not even a pattern I could place, just a single note that bent in the air, hanging too long to be natural, too deliberate to be an accident. And the strangest thing was, no matter how hard I strained my ears, I couldn't find where it came from. It was nowhere, and yet it was everywhere. We'd driven our RV out to western Colorado that summer. I was 39 at the time, with more gray in my beard than I wanted to admit, and my younger sister, Rachel, had talked me into tagging along with her and her boyfriend, Marcus, for a trip that was supposed to clear our heads. They'd been fighting, and I'd been drifting after a rough divorce, so the plan was to park ourselves for a week in a forest campground. Just the trees, the stars, and us, Rachel had said. She was 28, bright-eyed, stubborn, the kind of person who could still see possibility even when everything around her was fraying. The campground wasn't one of those crowded tourist spots with neon signs and weekend families. This one was tucked far back off a county road, a scatter of 10 primitive sites that circled a clearing in the woods. Each site had nothing but a weathered picnic table, a metal fire ring, and the woods pressing in on all sides. When we pulled in, only 2 other campers were parked there. An older couple in a silver Airstream at the far end, and a beat-up van that looked abandoned, parked haphazardly under some pines. I remember how still the place felt when we shut off the engine. No chatter of kids, no barking dogs, not even the buzz of generators. Just the sigh of wind in the trees, that carrying that dry, resinous smell of pine needles baking in the sun. It was beautiful, but there was something about the silence that pressed on me, like the air was waiting for something. We set up quick. Rachel spreading out a camp rug under the awning, Marcus clanging around with the cooler, me leveling the RV. By dusk, we had a small fire going, flames licking high, our chairs pulled close. I let myself relax for the first time in weeks, staring at the sky as it bled from purple to black. That's when I heard it. A whistle, high, clear, coming from the tree line. I froze, the hair on my neck prickling. Marcus was mid-sentence but stopped too, his head turning sharply. Rachel noticed us both staring. "What?" she asked. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. A beat later it came again. A single note, held long with a strange rising pitch, like someone breathing into a flute but never pausing for air. It wasn't a bird. I'd grown up around woods. I knew their calls. This was different. Rachel frowned, hugging her knees. Probably just somebody else out here. A hiker or something, but Marcus shook his head. That didn't sound right. We waited, listening, the fire snapping quietly. Then silence swallowed us again. No crickets, no wind, just silence. I told myself it was nothing, that the woods have a way of making small things seem strange when you're not used to them. Still, I noticed how Marcus kept glancing at the trees, how Rachel pulled her blanket tighter around her shoulders. We stayed up later than usual, maybe because none of us wanted to be the first to admit we were uneasy. That night, lying in my bunk, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the RV made me stiffen. Around 2 a.m, I slipped out of bed and pulled back the curtain just a crack. The clearing outside was still lit by the embers of our fire, glowing faintly like an open wound in the dark. That's when I heard it again. The whistle. Not far this time. Close. Right outside. I held my breath, heart pounding. It was steady, louder, piercing the glass between me and the night. I scanned the trees, desperate to find the shape of whoever was making it, but there was nothing. No shadow, no figure, no movement at all. Then, as if it knew I was listening, the whistle cut off mid-note. The silence that followed was worse than the sound itself. I stood there, gripping the curtain, waiting for it to return. But the night remained empty. Eventually, my legs trembled from standing so long, and I crawled back to bed, though sleep never came. In the morning, over burnt coffee and eggs, I asked Rachel and Marcus if they'd heard it again. They hadn't. Rachel laughed it off, but her laugh was too quick, too thin. "You're just on edge," she said. "That divorce did a number on you." Maybe she was right. Maybe my nerves were tuned too tight, picking up things that weren't there. But when I glanced at Marcus, he wasn't laughing. He kept his eyes on his plate. Jaw tight. We decided to go for a hike that day, following a narrow trail that wound down along a creek bed. The woods were beautiful, tall pines towering overhead, the air cool and damp under their shade. But even there, I felt watched. Every snap of a twig made me turn. Every hollow in the trees seemed too deep. Halfway down the trail, we passed a tree with something carved into its bark. A spiral, deep, ragged lines gouged by a knife or something sharper. The wood around it looked old, healed over, like it had been there for years. Marcus ran his hand over it and muttered, "Creepy." We moved on faster after that. That evening, as the sun dropped, the campground felt emptier than before. The Airstream was gone, its spot cleared out. The van was still there, though I hadn't seen a soul around it since we arrived. As night settled, Rachel tried to lighten the mood by telling ghost stories by the fire. Her voice was bright, animated, but her eyes flicked toward the trees more than once. Marcus didn't say much at all. And then, just as the fire was burning low, it came again. The whistle, this time from behind the van. Marcus stood up, grabbing the flashlight, sweeping the beam toward the shadows. Nothing, just the van, silent and still, The whistle had stopped the moment the light cut across it. Rachel swallowed hard. Maybe it's somebody messing with us. Marcus shook his head. That van hasn't moved since we got here. I don't think anyone's in it. We sat frozen, the fire popping, our eyes straining into the dark. I wanted to pack up right then and there, but something in me, maybe pride, maybe denial, kept me seated. I didn't want to be the one who ruined the trip because of a noise, but deep down I knew it wasn't just a noise, and the worst part was it felt like it was waiting for me. That night, none of us spoke much after the sound. We sat by the fire until the logs collapsed into glowing embers, each of us pretending we were too tired to talk, but none of us admitting we were afraid. When we finally crawled back into the RV, it felt too quiet, the walls too thin. Rachel took the back bunk, Marcus the pullout, and I slid into the narrow upper berth. The three of us lying there, listening to each other breathe in the dark, waiting for something. But the whistle didn't come again. Not that night. Instead, I dreamed. Vivid, suffocating dreams that felt more like warnings. In one, I was standing at the tree line, staring into the dark. From the blackness, a figure began to walk toward me, but its body was wrong, its arms too long, its legs bending at strange angles. When it opened its mouth, no words came out, just that same shrill whistle, blasting so loud it felt like my skull would crack open. I woke drenched in sweat, my throat dry, my chest pounding. The sun was only just bleeding into the clearing, pale gray light seeping through the blinds. For a long time, I lay there listening, half expecting to hear it again. At breakfast, Rachel was unusually quiet, pushing her food around her plate. Marcus barely touched his coffee. It was me who finally broke the silence. Did either of you dream last night? They both looked up. Rachel shook her head slowly, though her eyes flicked away too fast. Marcus didn't answer at all. I let it drop, but I knew we were all lying to ourselves in different ways. Later that morning, Rachel suggested we take the bikes out along the dirt road that led deeper into the forest. It'll help, she said, forcing brightness into her voice. Fresh air, exercise. We're not going to sit around here being weird about some sound. I agreed, even though my gut twisted at the thought of leaving the RV behind. The ride was rough, the dirt road washed out in places lined with thick walls of pine. For a while, the rhythm of pedaling helped settle me. The air was sharp and clean, filled with the smell of sap. But the deeper we went, the more oppressive the woods began to feel. The trees seemed to grow closer, hemming us in. Shadows clung to the undergrowth, even though the sun was high overhead. A mile or two in, we came across another carving in a tree. This one wasn't just a spiral, it was a face, or at least something like one. 2 hollow ovals for eyes, a long slit for a mouth, all gouged deep as though someone had hacked it violently into the bark. We stopped, staring. Rachel muttered, "That's sick." Marcus glanced over his shoulder, scanning the woods. This isn't just kids messing around. I wanted to say something logical, something grounding, but I couldn't find the words. My throat was tight, my skin crawling. That's when I noticed something else. Everywhere around us, the forest had gone silent. No birdsong, no wind, not even the faint buzz of insects. The air felt thick, like the world itself was holding its breath. And then it came, the whistle. Sharp. This time, it came from ahead of us on the road. We all froze, our bikes creaking under our weight. I felt sweat bead on my neck despite the cool shade. The sound pierced the silence, stretching on until it finally cut off. Rachel whispered, No, that's not." But she didn't finish. Marcus's jaw was clenched, his knuckles white on the handlebars. We're turning back. None of us argued. We spun the bikes around and pedaled hard, the dirt spitting under our tires. Every few seconds, I glanced behind us, half expecting to see someone stepping onto the road, following. But there was nothing. Just trees, endless and still. When we finally reached the RV, I was shaking so badly I had to lean against the door before climbing inside. Rachel sat on the steps, burying her face in her hands. Marcus paced back and forth, muttering under his breath. The day dragged on after that. None of us wanted to admit we were scared, but none of us could relax either. Even in daylight, I kept thinking I heard it. Soft whistles, faint and distant, as though they were floating just beyond the clearing. Every time, I would stop what I was doing, straining to hear, only for the sound to vanish. By dusk, my nerves were raw. Marcus suggested we build a bigger fire, so we piled on extra wood until the flames leapt high, painting the clearing in orange. We sat closer together this time, chairs nearly touching. Rachel pulled out a flask she'd packed, passing it between us, trying to ease the tension. It worked a little. The alcohol burned down my throat, warming me, dulling the sharp edge of my fear. For a while we even laughed, though it was forced, too loud, the kind of laughter people use to hide what they're really feeling. But then, just as the fire snapped, it came again. The whistle. This time not from the trees, not from the road, but from the other side of the fire, right in front of us. We all jerked to our feet at once, the chairs clattering back. Marcus raised the flashlight, sweeping it across the clearing. The beam cut over the van, the trees, the empty picnic tables. Nothing. Yet the sound had been close, so close I'd felt it in my chest, vibrating through the air between us. Rachel's voice cracked. We need to leave. I don't care if it's midnight, we need to pack up and go. I wanted to agree. Every instinct in me screamed to get out, but Marcus was already shaking his head, his voice low, rough. If it wanted us gone, we'd already be gone. Running now just makes us blind. His words chilled me, because he wasn't saying them like a man trying to comfort us. He was saying them like someone who'd thought this through, like someone who believed it. The whistle didn't come again that night. But none of us slept. We stayed huddled in the RV, the blinds shut, the lantern burning low. Every creak of the tree's eyes made us flinch. Every rustle of the wind felt like a footstep. Sometime around 3 a.m, I dozed off in the passenger seat, only to be jolted awake by a sound. Not the whistle this time. A knock. 3 slow knocks on the side of the RV. I held my breath, staring at the wall. My skin crawled where the sound had landed, like the metal itself was quivering. Another knock, this time closer to the door. Marcus was already on his feet, grabbing the hatchet we kept by the counter. Rachel whispered his name, her voice trembling, begging him not to open it. He pressed a finger to his lips, creeping toward the door, hatchet raised. I sat frozen, every muscle locked, my eyes locked on the knob, waiting for it to turn. But it didn't. Instead, after a long silence, the whistle rose again. Low this time. Almost soft. Coming from just outside the door. The sound pressed against the thin RV door like it was seeping through the metal itself. A soft, drawn-out whistle that seemed too close, too deliberate. My stomach nodded. Rachel clamped both hands over her mouth, as if silencing her own breath could somehow keep it from noticing us. Marcus stood inches from the door, his shoulders tense, the hatchet gripped so hard the handle creaked. I wanted to tell him not to open it, not to even think about it, but the words stuck in my throat. If I spoke, it would hear me. I was sure of it. The whistle stretched on, bending in pitch, rising slightly before flattening out again. It was almost playful, taunting. And then, all at once, it cut off, leaving nothing but silence ringing in its wake. We waited. Seconds dragged into minutes. The only sound was Rachel's muffled sobbing behind me. My hand was slick with sweat where it gripped the edge of the counter. Every nerve in my body screamed that something was on the other side of that door, standing close enough to touch the handle, close enough to hear us breathe. Marcus didn't move. He stood there in a standoff with whatever was outside, the hatchet trembling just slightly in his hands. Finally, after what felt like forever, he stepped back, his chest heaving. He set the hatchet on the counter with a hollow clunk and sank into the dinette bench, running both hands over his face. Rachel broke then, letting out a strangled cry. "We have to leave. Please! Let's just go!" Marcus didn't answer right away. His eyes were fixed on the dark window blinds, his jaw tight, like he was trying to hear something the rest of us couldn't. At last he muttered, "Not yet. Not until daylight." I wanted to argue, but deep down I knew he was right. Driving out on those winding dirt roads in the middle of the night, panicked, half blind, that might kill us quicker than whatever was out there. Still, the thought of staying until dawn felt unbearable. None of us slept. We sat in silence, watching the darkness creep slowly into pale gray. Every so often, I thought I heard it again, faint whistles, distant knocks, but I couldn't tell anymore if the sounds were real or just my nerves fraying apart. When dawn finally cracked through the blinds, relief washed over me like a flood. We stepped outside, blinking into the cold morning air, scanning the clearing. Nothing looked disturbed, no footprints in the dirt, no broken branches. Just the same empty van sitting under the trees, its windows dark, its paint dull with dew. Rachel refused to look at it. She threw herself into packing, rolling up the rug, shoving gear into bins, slamming the awning closed. Marcus moved slower, methodical, his eyes constantly sweeping the tree line. I tried to help, but my hands shook so badly I dropped things more than I carried them. We were minutes away from pulling out when Rachel gasped, "Look!" She was pointing at the side of the RV, near the door. At first, I thought it was just dirt streaked from the rain we'd had the night before, but then I saw it clearly. 4 long, thin scratches, gouged deep into the paint. They were perfectly parallel, too neat to be random. Rachel stumbled back, her face pale. That wasn't there yesterday. Marcus stared for a long time, his lips pressed into a hard line. He didn't say a word. I wanted to climb into the driver's seat right then and tear down that dirt road without looking back. But before we could even finish latching the compartments, movement caught my eye. The van. Its back door was open, just a crack, barely more than an inch, but enough to see that it hadn't been shut tight the night before. I was certain of it. Every time I'd glanced at it, it had been closed. Now it yawned open, dark and hollow. Rachel whispered, "Someone's in there." Marcus grabbed my arm before I could move closer. "No, don't." And he was right again, because even from where I stood, I realized what was wrong. The ground around the van was undisturbed. No footprints in the mud, no signs of movement at all. It was like the door had opened itself. The 3 of us piled into the RV, slamming the locks shut. I started the engine, my foot heavy on the gas, and we tore down that rutted road faster than was smart. Every bump jolted us, but I didn't care. I just wanted distance between us and that place. The forest thinned, the sunlight grew stronger, and for a brief, dizzying moment, I let myself believe we were safe, that we'd leave the campground behind, chalk it up to some freak occurrence, and never speak of it again. But the thing about fear is, it doesn't leave just because the scenery changes. We pulled into a small town an hour later, parking near a diner for breakfast. None of us talked much as we slid into a booth. Rachel stirred her coffee so long it went cold. Marcus sat stiff, staring out the window at nothing. Finally, I broke the silence. "We need to figure out what that was." Rachel shook her head violently. "No, we don't. We just forget it. Pretend it never happened." Marcus spoke for the first time since we'd left. His voice was low, almost a growl. "You can't forget something like that." I leaned forward. "So what do you think it was?" He didn't look at me. His eyes stayed on the street outside, watching people move in and out of shops, completely unaware of what we'd just left behind. Finally, he said it wasn't human. The words sat heavy between us. Rachel flinched, covering her ears. I felt my throat tighten. Because even though it sounded insane, even though every rational part of me wanted to deny it, I couldn't. Deep down, I knew he was right. We didn't go back to that campground. We drove on hours deeper into Colorado, finding another site miles away. A normal place with families and kids and campfires that smoked cheerfully into the evening sky. It should have felt safe. But that night, lying in the bunk, I heard it again. The whistle, faint this time, almost drowned out by the sounds of the campground. But it was there, and I realized then it hadn't stayed in that clearing. It had followed us. I lay frozen in my bunk, staring at the ceiling of the RV while the faint whistle drifted through the night air. It was so subtle, carried just above the sound of crickets and distant laughter from families sitting around their own campfires. If I hadn't already known it, I might have dismissed it as someone's breathy attempt at a tune. But I knew better. I knew the sound was for me. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. I just listened, waiting for it to fade. After what felt like forever, it did. But the silence it left behind was worse, because now I knew, wherever we went, it could come. The next morning, I told myself it had been in my head. Stress, nerves, lack of sleep. I was good at rationalizing things when I had to be. But when I stepped out of the RV, I found Marcus already standing by the picnic table, pale and tight-lipped, staring at the tree line. "You heard it too," I said quietly. He didn't answer, not directly. He just looked at me with eyes that were more tired than I'd ever seen and said, "It's not the place. It's us now." I felt a cold wave crash through me. Rachel came out a little later, her hair tied back, her face set in the kind of determination she always wore when she was trying not to crumble. She saw us standing there, tense, and forced a bright tone. "We're not doing this. Whatever last night was, it's done. We're safe here." But her voice shook, and when a kid in the next side over let out a sharp whistle while calling to his dog, Rachel jumped so hard she dropped the coffee she was holding. None of us mentioned it, but we all knew. That day dragged by like a blur. We tried to act normal, walking around the campground, cooking meals, even playing cards at the picnic table. But there was a stiffness to everything, like we were play acting at being ordinary, while some invisible weight pressed down on us. Every so often, I thought I heard it again. A faint note woven into the sound of wind, or a high pitch threading through the chatter of campers. But whenever I looked at Marcus, his expression told me I wasn't imagining it. He heard it too. By the third day, Rachel was breaking. She snapped at Marcus over nothing, slammed cupboards too hard, buried herself in her phone just to drown everything else out. At night, I could hear her crying softly in her bunk. I wanted to comfort her, but how could I? What could I possibly say? The whistle had become like a shadow, sometimes loud, sometimes faint, sometimes vanishing for hours only to return in the quietest, most vulnerable moments. It wasn't constant enough to fight, but it was steady enough to destroy our nerves. On the fourth night, things reached a breaking point. We were sitting outside by a modest fire when it came again, louder than ever before, clear and sharp, rising up from just beyond the glow of the flames. It was so close it made the hairs on my arms stand up. Rachel stood suddenly, trembling, her face pale. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered. "I can't." Before either of us could stop her, she bolted, ran across the clearing, straight toward the trees. "Rachel," I shouted, leaping to my feet. Marcus was right behind me, flashlight swinging wildly as we tore after her. She was fast, crashing through the brush, branches snapping in her wake. My chest burned as I tried to keep up, lungs searing with every breath. The beam of Marcus's light bounced across trunks and shadows, barely keeping her in sight. Then the whistle came again, piercing, deafening. This time it wasn't from behind us. It was ahead. Rachel screamed. Not a frightened yelp, but a raw, soul-deep scream that cut into the night. We burst into a small clearing, but she wasn't there. Just emptiness, our firelight faint behind us, the trees closing in like bars. "Rachel," Marcus's voice cracked, ragged with panic. I spun in circles, searching, my own breath coming in shudders. The whistle rose again, circling us this time, echoing from everywhere at once. And then faintly, I heard her. Her voice, desperate and terrified. "Help me!" Marcus lunged toward the sound, but I grabbed his arm. "No, it's leading us." He ripped free, stumbling into the brush. "Rachel," I had no choice but to follow. We crashed through the woods for what felt like hours, chasing her voice, chasing that whistle, always just ahead, always out of reach. My legs ached, my throat was raw, and still we kept going, deeper and deeper into the forest. At last, we stumbled into another clearing, breathless. This one was different. In the center stood a tree, massive, ancient, its bark thick and gnarled, and carved into its trunk over and over, spiraling up its length, were faces. Dozens of them, hollow eyes, slit mouths, some simple, some jagged, some stretched wide in what looked like screams. The sight made my stomach turn, and then I realized every single mouth was shaped like a whistle. The air was thick, heavy, almost humming. And then, without warning, The sound began again. Not from one direction this time, but from the tree itself, from all of it. Every carved mouth whistled in unison, a chorus of shrill, piercing notes that drilled into my skull. I dropped to my knees, clutching my ears, screaming for it to stop. My vision blurred, my chest heaving. Somewhere through the noise, I heard Rachel crying. Not ahead of us, not behind, but everywhere. And then, as suddenly as it started, the sound cut off. The silence slammed into me like a weight. I gasped for air, my ears ringing, my body trembling. Marcus staggered beside me, his flashlight beam quivering across the carved faces. His eyes were wide, his mouth working soundlessly, like he couldn't find words. We stood there for a long time, paralyzed. Finally, with shaking hands, I pulled him back, forcing us to stumble away from that tree, back into the woods. We never found Rachel that night. By dawn, we were still wandering, exhausted, our throats raw from calling her name. The forest looked endless, unchanging, my mind frayed at the edges. When we finally stumbled back into the campground clearing, the fire had burned out, the RV sat silent, and there was no trace of her, only the whistle. Faint, distant, but now unmistakably hers. We collapsed into camp at first light like we'd been spit out of the forest. My legs were so weak I could barely stand, and Marcus stumbled against the picnic table, dropping hard onto the bench, his head hanging. My throat was raw from shouting Rachel's name, my ears still ringing from that impossible chorus of whistles. But the clearing was empty. Rachel wasn't there. Her shoes were gone. Her jacket, too. No footprints, no snapped branches leading back into the trees. Just nothing, as if she'd been erased. I wanted to run straight to the ranger station, call in helicopters, bring in dogs, flood the place with people who could sweep every inch of those woods. But when I grabbed Marcus by the shoulders and said as much, he just shook his head slowly. "They won't find her," he said, voice flat. I stared at him, anger boiling up. "What the hell are you talking about? We can't just sit here. She's out there." But Marcus lifted his head, and the look in his eyes made my words catch. They were hollow, drained, like he'd already given her up. "She's gone," he whispered. "It's got her." I wanted to scream at him, shake him, force him to fight, but deep down somewhere I didn't want to admit, I knew he was right. That tree, those carved faces, the sound that had come from everywhere at once, there was no world in which Rachel had simply gotten lost. Something had taken her, and it had taken her in a way that search parties and maps couldn't fix. Still, I couldn't accept it. Not yet. I forced Marcus back into the RV, and we drove to the ranger station 20 miles away. My hands shook on the wheel the whole time, yet every turn of the road blurring past me in a haze. When we walked into the little log building, I tried to sound rational, tried to explain. My sister had gone missing. She'd run into the woods. We couldn't find her. I left out the whistles, the carvings, the faces in the tree. I knew how that would sound. The ranger, a wiry man with a sunburned neck, nodded soberly, writing notes as I spoke. He promised to get a team together, promised they'd start a grid search at first light the next day. He was professional, calm, the kind of man who'd probably done this before. But when I mentioned the campground by name, his pen stilled. His eyes flicked up at me, sharp, calculating. "That site's been closed for years," he said. My stomach dropped. I stammered something. No, we'd been there. There were sites, fire rings, even a van parked under the trees. But the ranger only frowned, leaning back in his chair. Closed. Dangerous terrain. Flash floods took out part of the access road. There shouldn't be anyone camping there. Marcus muttered something under his breath that I couldn't catch, and I felt the blood drain from my face. If that place wasn't supposed to exist anymore, then what had we been in? The ranger sent us back to town to rest, said they'd handle it. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe in order, in systems, in people who could fix things. But as we walked out of that station, I caught Marcus staring at the trees beyond the parking lot, his jaw clenched, his eyes full of that same grim certainty. "She's not coming back," he said again, almost to himself. That night in the motel, I lay awake, the air conditioner rattling, the cheap curtains fluttering in the breeze. I thought maybe in a real bed, surrounded by walls and light, I could finally sleep. But sometime past midnight, the sound came again. The whistle. Clear, sharp. Right outside the thin glass of the window, I bolted upright, heart hammering, staring into the shadows. The curtains swayed, but there was nothing beyond them. No silhouette, no shadow. Just the sound, rising and bending, pulling at something deep inside me. And then, God help me, I heard her voice. Help me. Soft. Faint. Rachel's voice. I ripped the curtain back, but there was nothing. Just the empty parking lot, the glow of a streetlight, the dark outline of trees beyond. I didn't sleep again. By morning, the ranger had his team combing the woods, but Marcus and I didn't go back with them. He refused outright, and I couldn't force myself to step into those trees again. We sat in the diner instead, drinking bitter coffee, staring at the clock, waiting for a call that never came. By the third day, the search was scaled back. They found no sign of her. Not a scrap of clothing, not a footprint, not a trace. The official story would be that she'd wandered off, gotten disoriented, maybe even tried to head toward a road and never made it. It happens more often than you'd think, one of the rangers told me, his voice gentle, rehearsed. But I knew better. That night, back in the motel, I heard it again. Not outside this time. Inside. The whistle rose from the bathroom, soft at first, then sharper, clearer. I stood frozen in the dark, staring at the closed door, the sound curling out from beneath it like smoke. My skin went cold. I forced myself to move, one step, then another, until I was standing just outside the door. The whistle stopped. For a long moment, silence stretched out, and then, slowly, the door creaked open by itself. The bathroom was empty. Marcus didn't even ask when I told him. He just nodded like he'd been waiting for it to happen. Over the next week, it followed us everywhere. A whistle threading through the noise of a gas station, a whistle echoing faintly in a grocery store aisle, a whistle cutting across the hum of traffic on the interstate. Always when I was still. Always when I was listening. Sometimes it was Rachel's voice that followed it. Thin, pleading, breaking my heart every time. Help me. Don't leave me. Once, even, come closer. And every time, I felt a pull, not just fear, something deeper, like it wanted me to step forward, to listen, to give myself over to whatever had claimed her. Marcus grew quieter and quieter as the days passed. He stopped sleeping altogether, his eyes ringed and hollow. Finally, one night, he said what I'd been dreading. It wants us too. I tried to deny it, to argue, but my words fell flat. Because I knew he was right. The whistle wasn't just hunting us, it was calling us. And sooner or later, one of us was going to answer. Marcus was the first to unravel. I should have seen it coming. He'd been hollow since the night Rachel vanished, his voice dulled, his movements automatic. But the whistle was grinding him down faster than me. Maybe because he'd been closer to it in the woods. Maybe because he'd looked directly into that tree and seen the carvings move. Or maybe because it just wanted him more. We were in a truck stop off Highway 93, sitting at a sticky booth with our untouched food growing cold between us. I was staring at the clock, waiting for another hour to die so we could pretend we were still functioning people. Marcus sat across from me, shoulders hunched, his eyes darting to the windows every time the door chimed. And then I heard it, the whistle. Thin, sharp, curling through the clatter of dishes and chatter of truckers. Marcus's head snapped toward the sound before I even registered it. His breath hitched. His whole body went taut like a wire stretched to breaking. I tried to ground us. Ignore it. It's not real. It's not her. But his lips moved soundlessly, and I realized he was mouthing something. A name. Rachel's name. The whistle came again, louder this time, though no one else seemed to notice. It threaded through the room like smoke, slipping past the hum of voices, wrapping itself around Marcus. He pushed back from the table so suddenly the salt shaker toppled. "She's here," he said, his voice breaking. I grabbed his wrist. "No, Marcus, that's not her. That's not her." But he yanked free, eyes wild, and bolted for the door. I stumbled after him, my chair screeching across the tile. Outside, the lot was lit by humming fluorescents, trucks idling, a wide stretch of cracked asphalt. Marcus was in the middle of it, spinning in circles, staring at the dark tree line beyond. And then I heard it, Rachel's voice. Marcus. So soft, carried on the wind. He froze, tears streaming down his face, his whole body trembling, and then he started walking. Slow at first, then faster, toward the trees at the edge of the lot. I sprinted after him, catching his arm just as his feet hit the dirt. Stop! It's not her! It's not her! He fought me. Harder than I expected, his face twisted with desperation. You didn't hear it? She called my name. She needs me. I held on with everything I had. If you go in there, you won't come back. You know that. For a moment, I thought I'd lost him, his muscles strained against mine, his eyes fixed on the black space between the trunks where the whistle beckoned. But then his strength broke all at once. He collapsed against me, sobbing into my shoulder. I can't take it anymore, he whispered. It's everywhere. It's in my head even when it's not there. I didn't have words. All I could do was hold him, both of us shaking, the whistle still echoing faintly in the distance. That night in the motel, I stayed awake watching him. He lay on the other bed, his chest heaving, his hands twitching like he was reaching for something in his dreams. Once around 3 a.m, he whispered her name again, his lips curling into a faint smile. I was terrified. Not of the whistle, not even of the thing behind it, but of losing him the same way we'd lost Rachel, because I knew, deep down, I couldn't fight it alone. The next morning, Marcus was gone. His bed was empty, the sheets tangled, the door to the room unlocked. For one horrible second, I thought he'd slipped out in the night and gone straight into the trees. But then I found him sitting on the curb outside the motel, his elbows on his knees, his face pale and drawn. When I crouched beside him, he didn't look at me. His voice was hoarse, flat. I saw her. I didn't answer. He lifted his head finally, and his eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with red. She was standing at the end of the hall, last night, right outside the room, just standing there. She looked exactly the same clothes, same hair, everything. She even smiled at me. I felt my skin crawl. What did you do? I asked quietly. His hands trembled in his lap. I almost followed her, but she didn't move, just whistled. Once, and then she was gone. We sat there in silence, the morning sun climbing higher, traffic passing on the road. I wanted to tell him it was a dream, a hallucination, his mind playing tricks, but I couldn't, because I'd seen the bathroom door open by itself. I'd heard Rachel's voice clear as day when no one else had. And worse, I wanted to see her too. That thought gutted me. The whistle didn't stop. Over the next 3 days, it followed us like a shadow. In the gas station bathroom, I heard it dripping from the pipes. In the diner, it hummed beneath the jukebox. In the motel, it seeped from the vents, curling into our room like smoke. Marcus grew quieter, his eyes sunken, his body restless. He stopped eating. He paced for hours, whispering to himself. And I was no better. The sound got under my skin. It threaded into my bones, into the rhythm of my breath, until silence itself felt impossible. Sometimes I caught myself whistling back, not even realizing it until Marcus grabbed my arm and shook me, his face pale with fear. You can't answer it, he hissed. That's what it wants. But at night, lying awake, I thought about Rachel's voice, about how small and scared she'd sounded when she whispered my name. And I wondered, what if it really was her? What if she was trapped, calling out, and every time I ignored it, I was abandoning her all over again? The guilt was worse than the fear. It all came to a head on the 4th night. We were driving north, neither of us talking, when the whistle came again. This time so loud it cut through the hum of the engine, clear as if someone were sitting in the back seat. Marcus slammed on the brakes. The RV lurched, tires screeching against asphalt, throwing me hard against the dash, and then I heard it. Rachel's voice. Marcus, please. He turned to me, tears streaming down his face. I have to. I can't leave her out there. I can't. Before I could stop him, he was out the door, running into the trees. I shouted after him, my voice breaking, but he didn't turn back. The darkness swallowed him whole, his footsteps crunching, then fading, then gone, and then silence. The whistle didn't follow. Not this time. I stood in the road, shaking, staring into the black wall of trees, my heart hammering so hard I thought I'd collapse. I knew Marcus wasn't coming back. And for the first time, the silence felt worse than the sound. After Marcus ran into the trees, silence fell like a curtain. The road stretched empty in both directions. No headlights, no voices, no sound except the ticking of the RV engine as it cooled. I stood there with my breath catching in my throat, staring into the black line of pines where he'd vanished. Every instinct told me to follow him, to charge in, grab his arm, drag him back no matter what waited inside those trees. But I didn't move, because I knew what would happen. Marcus was gone. I'd seen that look in his eyes, the surrender. Not fear, not even hope, but something worse. Belief. He believed Rachel was calling, believed she was waiting just one step deeper in the dark, and belief was the final nail. Once you gave into it, you didn't come back. So I stayed rooted to the asphalt, tears burning my eyes, my hands balled into fists at my sides, and the silence pressed in. It was almost worse than the whistle. Without it, I felt exposed, abandoned, like the thing that had stalked us was standing just beyond the tree line, watching me, waiting. I finally forced myself back into the RV, locked the door, drew the curtains. But every time I looked up from the driver's seat, I expected to see Marcus staring back at me from the edge of the woods, or Rachel or something wearing their faces. The road was empty, but I didn't start the engine. I couldn't. Not yet. Because part of me was still listening, waiting to hear if the whistle would return. It did. Not that night. Not even the next morning. But the night after, when I stopped at a rest area and tried to close my eyes for the first real sleep since Marcus disappeared, it came soft at first, seeping from the vents above my bunk. A single note, flat and patient, curling into the silence of the RV. I sat up, heart hammering. It didn't stop. Instead, it shifted, rising and falling in a slow rhythm, the same 4 notes I'd heard since the campground. Only now it wasn't distant, it was inside. I pressed my palms to my ears, but it didn't matter. The sound wasn't just something I heard anymore. It was something I felt, vibrating inside my chest, humming through my bones. I stumbled out of the bunk and snapped the lights on, desperate to anchor myself to something real. That's when I saw it. Condensation. The front windshield was fogged from the inside. I hadn't been breathing that heavily. I hadn't cooked, hadn't showered, hadn't done anything that could have caused it. And there, drawn in the moisture, were 4 lines carved in with a fingertip. 4 lines crossing each other, jagged, uneven. The same symbol Marcus had described on the tree. I froze, staring at it, my stomach twisting so hard I thought I'd be sick. The whistle pulsed louder, like it was feeding off my fear. I grabbed a rag and wiped the glass clean, scrubbing until the symbol vanished. But within seconds, the condensation began to return. And slowly, painfully, the lines drew themselves again, this time without a hand. My knees buckled. I dropped the rag, stumbled back, shaking my head like I could shake the image out of existence. The whistle cut off mid-note. Silence. For a second, I thought maybe I'd broken through. Maybe it was over. Then, faintly, a voice. Please. Rachel's. So close I could almost feel her breath against my ear. I spun around, but the RV was empty. Rachel? My voice cracked. No answer. Just the faint hiss of the air vents. I sank into the driver's seat, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I tried to tell myself it was grief, that my mind was fracturing under the weight of loss. But deep down, I knew better. It wasn't me making the sound. It wasn't me drawing those lines. Something else was in here with me. The next morning, I drove. No destination. No plan. Just miles and miles of road, gas station to gas station, like forward motion could keep me one step ahead of it. But the whistle followed. In the hum of the tires, I heard it. In the static of the radio, I heard it. Once, when I stopped for gas, I swear the pump itself whistled, the air rushing through the hose shaping itself into those same 4 notes. I wanted to scream, but screaming wouldn't change it. By evening, I pulled off onto a side road, shaking too badly to keep driving. I parked in a gravel turnout, turned off the engine, and tried to steady my breathing. That's when I felt it. Not sound this time. Pressure, like someone was sitting on the bunk behind me. The mattress groaned under invisible weight, the faint squeak of springs shifting. My mouth went dry. Slowly, against every ounce of reason, I turned my head. The blanket was dented, pressed down as if by a hand or a body, though nothing was there. And then the whistle started again, not from the vents, not from outside, from right behind me. I couldn't move, my body locked, my chest burning as the sound drilled into me, sharp and relentless. And then light pressure brushed the back of my neck. Fingers. Cold. Lingering. That broke me. I bolted from the RV, stumbling into the gravel, sucking in the night air like I'd been drowning. My hands shook so hard I dropped the keys. I didn't even bother picking them up. I just ran, not caring where, not caring how far, as long as it was away. But the whistle followed. Through the trees, through the dark, threading between the branches. No longer faint or distant, close, right at my ear. "Come back," it whispered between notes. "Don't leave me." Rachel's voice. I fell to my knees, clutching my head, the sound filling me, splitting me apart. And for the first time, I wanted to give in. Because what if it was her? What if she really was calling? What if Marcus had found her and I was the coward for running? I pressed my forehead to the dirt, sobbing, the whistle swelling until it drowned out everything. And then silence again. Just silence. I lifted my head. The woods were empty. The RV was a dim shape through the trees, but carved into the dirt inches from my hands was the symbol. The same 4 lines, gouged deep, still fresh. I didn't draw it. I couldn't keep running forever. But I didn't know what would happen if I stopped. I didn't go back to the RV that night. I couldn't. I sat in the dirt clearing, knees pulled tight to my chest, staring at the symbol carved before me. My breath came in ragged pulls, and every muscle in my body trembled like it was holding itself together by threads. The woods around me were silent. No crickets, no owls, just that strange, watchful stillness. I told myself I'd wait until sunrise, then walk back, grab the RV keys, and drive until the tank ran dry. That was the plan. That was the only thing I could cling to. But the whistle had other ideas. It came again, not as sound this time, but as vibration, rippling through the ground beneath me. The dirt hummed, the symbol glowing faintly as if alive, and then Rachel's voice. "Why did you leave me?" I clenched my eyes shut, my nails dug into my palms hard enough to draw blood. "Stop," I whispered. "You're not her, you're not." The voice answered, softer, closer. "It's cold here. I'm so cold. Please, help me." My heart broke hearing it, because grief doesn't care about logic. Grief doesn't care about proof. It only cares about the hole in your chest and the desperate hope that somehow, the voice you love might still be real. Tears blurred my vision. I shook my head hard, as if I could rattle the sound loose. "You're not Rachel. She's gone. She's..." But I couldn't finish the sentence, because deep down, I wasn't sure. The rest of the night blurred. I didn't sleep. I barely moved. When dawn finally broke, pale light spilling across the trees, I stumbled back to the RV. It looked wrong, like it had been waiting for me. Condensation filmed every window, and on each pane the symbol had been drawn, over and over, hundreds of times, inside the windshield, across the side windows, even on the bathroom mirror. Everywhere I looked, the lines stared back. I gripped the handle, frozen, bile rising in my throat, and then I heard it again, muffled from inside. "Come in." Rachel's voice. For a moment, I almost obeyed. My hand tightened on the latch. I wanted so badly to believe she was waiting inside, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the way the voice dragged, just slightly too slow, like a recording warped on old tape, or maybe it was the faint whistle buried underneath, still threading every word. I staggered back, shaking my head. "No," I whispered. "Not like this. Not like this." And I walked away. Left the RV, left everything. My clothes, my phone, my money. None of it mattered anymore. The only thing that mattered was getting as far from that whistle as possible. But it didn't let me go. The farther I walked, the more the forest bent around me. Trails that should have led to roads looped back on themselves. Trees seemed to shift, their trunks carrying the same etched lines Marcus had described. No matter which direction I chose, I always ended up back at the RV. By the second day, I stopped trying. I sat in the dirt outside, watching it, Waiting. The whistle came at dusk. This time it didn't pretend. It poured out in full, Rachel's voice layered over those 4 notes, speaking with an awful clarity that froze my blood. You left him. You left Marcus. You left me. I covered my ears, rocking back and forth, my throat raw from screaming. Stop! Please, stop! But it kept going, louder, crueler. You could have saved us, but you're weak. You're nothing. The whistle was no longer sound, it was thought, invading me, worming through the cracks in my mind. Every word drilled in, echoing in my skull, until I couldn't tell where my own thoughts ended and the things began. And then, silence. Utter, suffocating silence. Followed by a whisper, turn around. My whole body locked. Slowly, against my will, I turned. She was standing there, Rachel, or what looked like her. Hair tangled, eyes wide, skin pale like moonlight. She wore the same hoodie she'd vanished in, the sleeves torn, the fabric damp as though she'd climbed out of a river. Her lips curved in a trembling smile. You found me, she said. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. She took a step closer, and the whistle surged, vibrating through her voice, through her body, as if she wasn't speaking at all, just a vessel for the sound. Something deep inside me screamed to run. But another part, smaller, weaker, ached to reach out, to take her hand, to finally let the grief win. I raised my arm without meaning to, fingers trembling toward hers. Her eyes widened, hopeful, desperate. And for one terrible heartbeat, I believed. But then I saw it. The symbol, faint and glowing, etched into her skin just above her wrist. The same 4 jagged lines, pulsing faintly with each note of the whistle. Rachel never had that. This wasn't her. It had never been her. My hand dropped. Her face twisted, the smile collapsing into something sharp and hungry. The whistle shrieked, high and piercing, so loud I thought my skull would split. She lunged. I stumbled backward, tripped, hit the dirt hard, scrambling away as the figure of Rachel convulsed, her body jerking like a puppet on invisible strings. The whistle poured out of her mouth, not sound anymore, but force, pressing against me, crushing me. Don't run, it hissed through her teeth. Don't leave me again. I crawled, gasping, dragging myself through the dirt until my fingers closed around a rock. I hurled it with everything I had. It passed straight through her, like smoke, like shadow. She dissolved into mist, the whistle scattering with her, echoing through the trees until it was everywhere, all around me, inside me. And then, gone. The clearing was empty. I lay there for what felt like hours, sobbing, my chest heaving, unable to move. Because I knew the truth now. Rachel was gone. Marcus was gone. And whatever had taken them wasn't finished with me. Not yet. The whistle didn't return that night, or the next. But I know it will. Because when I finally forced myself back into the RV, there on the wall above the bunk, scratched deep into the metal with something sharper than any knife, was a single message. You can't leave. And beneath it, carved over and over until the wall looked flayed. The 4 lines, the symbol, waiting for me to give in. I stopped keeping track of days. Maybe 2 passed, maybe 5. Out here in this looping trap of dirt roads and bending pines, time felt stretched thin, warped like a funhouse mirror. The only clock I had was the whistle. Every dusk, without fail, it returned, sometimes soft like breath in my ear, sometimes violent, shaking the walls of the RV until the cabinets rattled. Always the same 4 notes, always carrying her voice, twisting it, wearing it like skin. Rachel begging. Rachel accusing. Rachel laughing. It was never the same tone twice, and I couldn't tell anymore if it was getting stronger or if I was just getting weaker. The RV had become a cage. Every surface carried the symbol now. Scratched into the linoleum floor, burned faintly into the countertop, etched across the ceiling like constellations. I tried to scrub them out at first, tried soap, tried knives, even tried burning them with the stove flame until smoke filled the air. Didn't matter. By morning, they were back. Always the same shape, always watching. And sometimes they moved. I'd turn away, close my eyes, and when I opened them again, the lines had shifted. Edges sharper. Corners bending just slightly differently, like they were crawling across the surfaces 1 fraction of an inch at a time. I stopped sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard it. Rachel's voice right there beside me, whispering things I couldn't unhear. You could have pulled me back that night. You didn't run fast enough. You never loved me enough to save me. The whistle wove through every word, making each syllable vibrate inside my bones. By the third sleepless night, I'd chewed my fingernails down to raw skin. My body shook constantly. My lips bled where I bit them, and the thought kept circling. Maybe if I gave in, it would stop. That thought became an itch, not a fleeting idea, an obsession. The whistle wanted me, the symbol wanted me, and some part of me wanted them back. Not Rachel, not Marcus, not the people I'd lost, but the promise of them, the illusion, the chance to stop hurting, even if it meant letting the whistle fill me completely. I caught myself one night standing in front of the wall, fingers tracing the carved lines. My lips moved before I realized I was speaking. Take me. The sound slipped out like a secret, like a confession, and the whistle answered instantly. It surged through the RV with a force that bent the air, a shriek so sharp I fell to my knees, clutching my head. Dishes rattled, the walls groaned. The lights flickered, and then her face, Rachel's face, pressed into the condensation on the window like someone on the other side was breathing against the glass. Eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream, I staggered back, heart pounding so hard it hurt. The image faded, and I knew then, if I said it again, if I meant it, it wouldn't stop at a face. It would come inside. I tried running again the next morning. I packed nothing, just bolted out the door, sprinting through the trees until my lungs burned. Didn't matter which way I turned. Always the same looping trails, always the RV waiting when I stumbled back out of the woods. The last time I collapsed in front of it, screaming until my throat gave out. The whistle answered, faint and mocking, like laughter buried in the trees. That's when it hit me. It wasn't keeping me here by force. It was keeping me here because I couldn't leave. Because it had wounded itself into me too deep. That night, I broke. The whistle came soft, almost tender, wrapping around me like a lullaby. Rachel's voice slipped through it, gentle this time. You don't have to fight anymore. Just follow. The door of the RV creaked open on its own. Cold air spilled inside, smelling of pine and river water. The forest outside glowed faintly with the moonlight, paths between the trees lit like silver veins. I knew what it wanted. It wasn't going to drag me. It wanted me to walk. I stood there in the doorway for a long time, staring out into the pale-lit woods. My whole body trembled, my mind screamed not to move, but my feet shifted anyway. One step down, then another. The whistle grew louder, richer, carrying layers of voices now. Not just Rachel. Marcus, too. Others I didn't know. Dozens of voices braided together into one long, beckoning call. Each step I took, the forest seemed to open wider. The symbol gleamed faintly on the trunks, guiding me like breadcrumbs. I don't know how long I walked. Minutes, hours. It blurred into one long surrender. But eventually the trees opened into a clearing, and there it was, the source. A tree, massive, ancient, its trunk so wide it seemed to swallow the moonlight. The bark was covered in the symbol, carved so deep the lines glowed with a pale, pulsing light, and at its base, an opening. Not natural, not a hollow, a doorway. The whistle poured from it, the sound vibrating the ground beneath me, filling my chest until I thought my ribs would crack. And in that doorway, shapes moved, shadows of people, their outlines twitching and shuddering like marionettes, Rachel among them, Marcus too. Faces pale, eyes wide, mouths open in silent screams as the whistle poured through them. They reached out, hands trembling, beckoning me closer. And for a moment, just one terrible, perfect moment, I wanted nothing more than to step inside. Because if I did, I wouldn't be alone anymore. The whistle promised it. The whistle promised everything. But something stopped me. Not logic. Not bravery. A memory. Rachel, on the last night we were together before she vanished, sitting across the fire, eyes catching the flames as she said, "If anything ever takes me, don't follow. Promise me you won't follow." Her words cut through the sound, sharp as glass, and for the first time in days, the whistle faltered. The glow of the symbol dimmed just slightly. The shapes twitched, their hands trembling faster, frantic, as if they knew I was pulling back. I staggered, shaking my head, clutching my ears. "No," I whispered. "No, you don't get to have me." The whistle rose in a violent shriek, the ground trembling, the doorway widening. But I turned and ran until the forest tore at my skin, until branches lashed my face, until my lungs burned. I didn't care if I ended up back at the RV. I just needed to get away. When I collapsed in the dirt, gasping, the whistle was gone. Silence. Real silence. And for the first time since it all began, I felt the faintest flicker of hope. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over, because the symbol was still burned into my vision. Every time I blinked, I saw it. And I knew the whistle wasn't finished. It was waiting. Patient. Hungry. I woke in the dirt, not inside the RV, not at the clearing, just there, sprawled among pine needles, my cheek pressed against cold earth. For a second I thought I'd escaped, that the loop had snapped, that I'd broken whatever held me. But when I pushed myself up, hands shaking, I saw it. The symbol, not carved this time, not burned into wood or metal. It was alive. The pattern pulsed faintly in the soil itself, roots of it winding out beneath the forest floor like veins, and each beat matched the rhythm of my own heart. I stumbled back, gagging. The ground seemed to move beneath me, rising and falling like breath. It wasn't the campground that was infected. It was me. I found the RV again by accident. Didn't matter which way I turned, my feet dragged me back. The sight of it should have broken me, but instead I laughed. A dry, broken laugh that scraped my throat raw. Home sweet prison. Inside, the air stank of rot. The fridge door hung open, spoiled food dripping onto the floor. Mold traced the walls like vines. And everywhere the symbol crawled, etched, burned, gouged, alive. It shifted when I looked at it, rearranging itself like it was trying on new faces. When I blinked, I swore I saw Rachel's eyes in its angles, Marcus's crooked smile and the curve of the lines. I clamped my hands over my face and whispered to no one, "I'm not yours, I'm not." But my chest betrayed me, because beneath the panic, beneath the exhaustion, something else stirred. A longing, a pull. That night I dreamed. Not like before. This one was sharper, too sharp. I stood back at the clearing, the ancient tree before me, but this time the doorway was gone, the whistle was silent, and Rachel stood there alone. Her hair hung wet around her face. Her clothes clung to her skin, heavy with river water. She looked just as she had the night she vanished, and she was smiling. "Why are you fighting me?" she asked softly. I couldn't speak. My throat locked, every part of me screaming to run. But she stepped closer, tilting her head the way she used to when teasing me. "You don't have to be afraid. You don't have to be alone. All you have to do is follow." When she reached out, her hand shimmered. Not skin, not solid, just lines etched like the symbol, alive, shifting. I woke choking on air, clawing at my chest, and the whistle was waiting. It didn't creep anymore. It roared, not from the woods, not from the tree, from inside me. Each breath I took carried it. Each heartbeat throbbed with its notes. The RV shook with the sound, lights flickering, dishes crashing from the cabinets. I dropped to my knees, palms pressed against the floor, screaming for it to stop. But it didn't. And then I heard words inside the whistle. Dozens, layered, tangled. But one voice cut through all the others. Rachel's. "You promised." My blood went cold, because she was right. The last time I saw her, before that night on the river, before she disappeared into the dark, she'd asked me for one promise. If anything ever takes me, don't follow. And I had promised. I'd sworn it. But standing there in the screaming storm of sound, I realized the whistle was twisting that vow, turning it back on me. Because not following her then meant I lost her. Not following now meant I lost myself. I snapped. Maybe out of rage, maybe out of fear. I grabbed the fire extinguisher from the wall and hurled it at the symbol etched across the cabinets. The metal dented, paint splintered. The whistle shrieked in answer, violent enough to split my skull. I tore through the RV, smashing everything in reach. Plates, mirrors, lights, anything bearing the mark. But the more I destroyed, the more it grew. Lines crawled across the broken surfaces like cracks spreading in glass, until there was nowhere left untouched. And in the shattered reflection of the window, I saw my own face. The symbol was there too, etched faintly into my skin. I fell back, sobbing, because there was only one truth left. I couldn't run. I couldn't hide. I couldn't fight. There was only one place this ended. The tree. The doorway. Whatever waited beyond it. If I wanted this to stop, if I wanted even the chance of peace, I had to go back. Not as a follower this time, but as a challenger. I gathered what little I could. A lighter. A half-empty gas can I'd brought for the generator. A rusted hatchet. I didn't know if fire could hurt something like that tree. Didn't know if steel could carve through living symbols. But I knew I had to try, even if it killed me. Especially if it killed me. Because better to burn out fighting than to be swallowed whole. The forest seemed to lean closer as I walked. Every branch curved toward me. Every shadow followed. The whistle guided my steps, weaving between the trees like a tether, pulling me back to the clearing. By the time I arrived, my legs were shaking. My vision swam, but the tree was there, waiting. The doorway wide open, the whistle pouring through like a storm, shaking the ground, making the air shimmer. And the figures were there too. Rachel, Marcus, others. All standing in the glow, mouths open in voiceless screams. Their hands reached out, trembling, begging, accusing, promising. I stood at the edge of the clearing, gas can in one hand, hatchet in the other. The whistle grew louder, vibrating the air until my teeth rattled. And I knew this was it. No running, no hiding, no escape. Either I ended it here, or it ended me. I took one step forward, and the ground beneath me pulsed with the symbol, glowing brighter, faster, alive. Rachel's face flickered among the lines, lips shaping words I couldn't hear over the roar. I lifted the gas can, knuckles white, heart hammering. The whistle rose to a scream, and I walked into the clearing. The clearing swallowed me whole. The moment I crossed its threshold, the world changed. The air turned thick, as if I'd stepped underwater. My ears rang, the whistle inside and outside me colliding in a single endless shriek. The tree loomed ahead, massive, ancient, every twist of bark crawling with symbols. They pulsed like veins of fire, glowing brighter as I neared. And the doorway, God help me, the doorway yawned wide at its base. Darkness bled from it like smoke, swallowing the glow, swallowing the stars overhead. I tightened my grip on the gas can, forcing one foot in front of the other. The figures stood closer now. Rachel at the front, Marcus just behind her, others flickering in and out as if the whistle couldn't decide what shape to keep them in. Their mouths moved in silence. Pleading, cursing, begging. But all I heard was the whistle. I unscrewed the gas can, the sharp reek of fuel slicing through the sour air. My hand trembled, sloshing liquid onto my boots as I raised it high. The whistle's pitch shifted. Lower now, more urgent, almost like a warning. The ground beneath me quaked, roots tearing free of the soil. They writhed like snakes, curling toward me. I stumbled back, but kept pouring, splashing fuel across the base of the tree, over the glowing lines into the dark of the doorway. The figures shrieked without sound, clawing at the air, their shapes unraveling like smoke in wind. Rachel's eyes locked onto mine, and for a heartbeat, the whistle cut out. Her voice came clear, sharp, cutting through the storm. If you burn it, you burn me too. My chest seized. The can clattered to the ground, still gurgling fuel onto the dirt. She looked real now, solid. Her hair wet, her skin pale, her smile trembling. Not a ghost, not a shadow. Rachel. And God, I wanted to believe it. I wanted to believe I could pull her back. But the whistle surged again, louder, screaming inside my bones. I dropped to my knees, clutching my skull, the hatchet slipping from my hand. Rachel crouched in front of me, reaching out. You don't have to fight anymore, she whispered. Come with me. Follow. It's easier. Her hand hovered inches from mine, shimmering, trembling. If you love me, trust me. For a moment, I almost did, because she was everything I had lost, everything the river took from me that night, and here she was asking me not to let go. But then I saw her hand again, the lines, the shifting angles, the symbol wearing her face, and I remembered her last words before she disappeared, before the river swallowed her. If anything ever takes me, don't follow. I wrenched back, teeth bared, forcing myself to my feet. Rachel's face shattered like glass, pieces scattering into the roar of the whistle. In her place, the symbol pulsed brighter, lines twisting, forming a gaping mouth that opened in silent fury. The roots lunged, wrapping around my legs, my arms, dragging me toward the doorway. The whistle screamed. I snatched the lighter from my pocket with trembling hands, flicking it alive, a tiny flame against a storm. And I dropped it. The clearing erupted. The gas ignited in a rush of fire, flames racing along the roots, up the bark, into the doorway. The whistle cracked, shattered, splintered into jagged notes that tore at the sky. The figures screamed now, real sound, piercing, raw, their voices ripping through the night. Rachel's voice was the loudest. "Why didn't you follow?" I staggered back as fire consumed the tree, symbols writhing in agony, twisting, breaking apart. The doorway shrank, collapsing inward, blackness folding on itself. The whistle keened one final desperate note, and then silence. The clearing burned, flames clawing high into the night. The tree collapsed in on itself, crashing to the earth in a rain of ash. The figures were gone. The doorway gone, the whistle gone. All that remained was fire and the taste of smoke in my throat. I fell to my knees, coughing, tears streaming down my face. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was only me. No symbols crawling my skin, no voices in my head, no Rachel, just me. And the silence was heavier than the whistle had ever been, because silence meant she was gone, really gone, and I had killed the last piece of her that remained. I stumbled out of the clearing before the flames consumed it, every step hollow. The forest was quiet now, too quiet. The air felt lighter, but my chest heavier. I knew I should feel victorious, free. But all I felt was empty, because the whistle hadn't been just a curse. It had been her voice, her memory, her echo, and now I'd burned it away. Back at the RV, I collapsed onto the steps, staring at the dirt. Dawn crept slow through the trees, painting the world gold. Birds stirred, cautious, testing the morning air. It felt almost normal, almost safe. But I knew better, because I could still see the faint lines burned into my skin, glowing when the light hit just right. The symbol wasn't gone, not completely. It lived in me now, waiting. And sometimes when the wind caught just right, I swore I could still hear it. The whistle. Soft. Patient. Calling me home. I didn't leave the campground right away. I should have. God knows I should have. But something about the silence pinned me there. After weeks, maybe months, of living inside that endless shriek, the stillness felt foreign, like stepping into a room where the furniture's been rearranged. I didn't trust it. So I sat outside the RV until the sun climbed above the tree line, warming my face, burning off the dew. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I heard birdsong again. Simple, pure. And it nearly broke me, because it sounded like freedom, and I didn't know what to do with that. When I finally started the RV, the engine coughed like it had been asleep as long as I had. The tires crunched over gravel as I pulled out of the empty loop, past blackened treetops in the distance where the clearing had burned. I didn't look back, not once. But as the miles stretched beneath me, I realized something. The whistle wasn't truly gone, not in the way I'd hoped. The sound itself had died in the flames, sure, but the memory, the pull, lived on inside me like a scar under the skin. Every mile marker I passed, every sign pointing me toward civilization carried a faint echo. Not loud, not overwhelming, just present, like the whistle had rooted itself somewhere deeper now, where fire couldn't touch it. I stopped at a diner 3 towns over, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and coffee strong enough to peel paint. The waitress asked if I was passing through, and for a second I almost said yes. But then I caught sight of my reflection in the window beside me. The faint lines etched across my arms, glowing so faintly I wasn't sure if anyone else could see them. No, I wasn't just passing through, I was carrying something. And I didn't know how long it would carry me. The weeks after felt like recovery from an illness I couldn't name. I tried to sink back into routines, grocery shopping, fixing the RV's generator, pretending I hadn't spent nights tearing myself apart inside a forest. But ordinary things felt distant, like shadows of a life I'd left behind. Sleep didn't come easy. When it did, dreams carried me back to the clearing, to Rachel's face, to her words. Why didn't you follow? I woke every time with my hands pressed hard against my ears, bracing for a whistle that never came. I started to wonder if maybe that's the lesson of it all. Not survival, not victory, but loss. The whistle wasn't just a sound, it was a hunger, a reminder of how easily we follow the things that call us, whether they're good for us or not. It showed me how grief can twist itself into a beacon, leading us deeper into the woods when we should be finding our way out. And it made me face the hardest truth of all. Sometimes letting go hurts worse than holding on, but it's the only way to keep living. A month later, I drove back through another campground. Not the same one. I'd never be fool enough to return there. This place was brighter, friendlier. Families laughing around picnic tables, kids chasing each other with sticky hands, RVs lined up like dominoes in neat gravel lots. Safe. Normal. But as I parked my rig, I noticed something. A man across the loop stood perfectly still beside his camper, eyes closed, head tilted slightly, as though he were listening to something far away. And I knew that look. I knew it too well. My stomach sank as I realized the truth. The whistle wasn't mine alone. It never had been. It was out there, waiting, calling. I packed up that same night, pulling out before the stars had even cleared the haze. I didn't say goodbye to anyone, didn't explain. Because how could I? How do you warn someone about a sound they can't hear until it already owns them? All I could do was keep driving, and maybe that's what I'll do for the rest of my life. Keep moving, keep watching, keep listening for that faint, patient call. Because I know one thing for certain, you can burn the tree, you can silence the clearing, you can even outlast the sound itself. But the whistle never really ends. And if you ever hear it, if one night, while camping under stars that feel a little too sharp, or parked in a lot that feels a little too empty, you catch a thin, high note carried on the wind, don't follow it, don't listen, don't look, because once it finds you, it never lets go. Not completely. And if you're not careful, it'll make you part of its song, forever. I should start by saying I wasn't drunk, I wasn't high, and I wasn't exhausted in the way that causes hallucinations. I had worked a standard day, stayed late at the office, and boarded the Staten Island ferry the same way I had hundreds of times before. Ordinary evening. Ordinary steps. And yet, when I sat down inside that bright, echoing cabin with its rows of orange benches and rattling windows, I knew immediately something was wrong. The people weren't talking. Not just quiet, but utterly still. Dozens of commuters sat shoulder to shoulder, their faces slack and pale, and all of them were staring at me. Not glancing, not curious. Their eyes locked to mine as if they'd been waiting. And beyond the glass where the skyline should have glittered against the water, there was only a wall of gray mist swallowing the harbor. I told myself it was fog. New York harbor fog's thick and quick. I tried to steady my breath. I had to pull out my phone, but the screen wouldn't turn on. Not dead, just black, like the battery had been scooped clean. The ferry rumbled forward, but the engines sounded strained, higher pitched than they should. The benches vibrated against my legs. I stared back at the people, waiting for someone to look away, for one cough or sneeze, for anything human. No one moved. I left my seat. The sound of my footsteps echoed like I was walking inside a parking garage, too loud. The whole interior seemed wider, emptier than it should have. When I reached the forward windows, I pressed my face against the glass. There was no skyline, no Statue of Liberty, just endless water and fog the color of ash. I turned, and every passenger had turned their head to follow me. Not their bodies, just their heads. Neck muscles tense, eyes unblinking. I told myself this was a prank, a flash mob, a TikTok stunt. But my throat had gone dry. The air smelled wrong, like salt water layered over something chemical, burned plastic, or overheated wires. My teeth ached from it. I moved toward the exit doors. Normally, you can step outside, feel the wind, see the churn of wake in the harbor. I shoved the bar with my palm. It didn't budge. Tried again, harder, metal rattling, but it wouldn't open. I could see through the window, a smear of white fog pressed right up to the glass like paint. Behind me, a seat creaked, the first sound any of them had made. I spun, and one of the men, a middle-aged guy in a wrinkled suit, stood. He didn't say a word, just lifted his arm and pointed at me, his finger trembling not with weakness but with pressure like he was holding back from lunging. Then another stood. A woman with hair still damp from the rain. She pointed too, and then another, and another, until the entire ferry was standing, their arms extended, all pointing at me. The vibration in the floor grew stronger. I felt it in my teeth, in my chest, like the ship was grinding across stone instead of water. I stumbled back and pressed against the locked door, trapped between the fog and that silent congregation. Finally, one of them spoke. A whisper so thin I thought it was just in my head. "You stayed too late." The rest repeated it. Voices like static through broken speakers. "You stayed too late. You stayed too late. You stayed too late." I clutched the door bar and pulled until my hands burned, but the lock wouldn't give. My pulse hammered so hard my vision blurred. I dropped to the floor, crouched low, and crawled beneath their arms. Their faces didn't change. Their eyes stayed locked as I moved, but none reached for me. I scrambled to the stairwell that leads to the upper deck. The door opened too easily, swinging wide into darkness. Not dim light, total black. I hesitated, one hand on the frame, the other shaking with adrenaline. I could hear the voices behind me still chanting, but their words had changed. Not yours, not yours, not yours. The black stairwell breathed out warm air, humid and foul, like the inside of a subway tunnel after a flood. My gut twisted. I couldn't go up there. I turned and bolted the other way, back down the narrow corridor that led toward the stern. The chanting faded as if the voices had stayed behind. My footsteps echoed, my lungs burned, and I ran until I slammed into another locked door. Behind its glass window there was nothing but swirling fog. I pressed my forehead to the glass. For one brief second, I thought I saw the skyline. Tiny lights, a jagged outline of buildings in the distance. Relief surged through me. But then the lights shifted. Not buildings at all, but windows, hundreds of them, stacked at odd angles, glowing faintly yellow as if an entire city was drifting underwater, just below the surface. And something moved between them, something tall enough to block entire rows of windows at once. I staggered back. My hands slipped against the sweating metal door, and when I turned, the corridor was no longer empty. The passengers stood there, filling the hallway, arms lowered now, heads tilted slightly to the side, like they were listening to something only they could hear. One of them spoke again, this time louder. A woman's voice, flat as a dial tone. "There is no last ferry." The floor dropped beneath me, no warning, just a lurch so violent I slammed into the wall. The ship groaned, engines screeching like they'd been torn out of alignment. Every light flickered and went black. For a second, the only illumination was the dim glow from those impossible underwater windows outside. And then even those winked out. The passengers didn't move. They stood in darkness with me, breathing in unison, each inhale sharp and wet, each exhale like steam. My chest locked up, my knees buckled. I clawed at the wall for balance, trying to remember the exact layout of the ferry, the routes I knew by habit. If I could just reach the crew deck, the captain's quarters, something. A voice cut through the dark. This time, not theirs. Mine. From the other end of the corridor, my voice said, clear as a recording, "I stayed too late." And then footsteps, my own cadence, heavy and uneven, approaching through the dark. The footsteps closed in and I froze. The sound was unmistakable, my own rhythm, the way I limped slightly when tired, the faint scuff of my left heel against the floor. I'd heard it 1,000 nights walking home, and now it was coming toward me in a corridor where I should have been alone. The passengers parted to let it through. Their bodies shifted just enough for a gap to form, and in the darkness, I saw the outline step forward. Same height, same shoulders, same stance. I couldn't see its face, but I knew it was mine. I stumbled backward until my spine pressed against the glass door. My palms found the window, but the fog outside clung to it like a second layer of skin, thick enough to make me feel like I was underwater. I could taste salt, bitter and metallic. The thing stopped a few feet away. It tilted its head. I did the same without meaning to, like a mirror. The passengers whispered, all together, like the rustle of wind through dry reeds, "Give it back." The double raised its hand, my hand. For a moment I thought it was going to point at me like the rest had, but instead it opened its palm. There was something in it, a small silver token, no bigger than a subway fare coin, etched with a circle of jagged lines like fairy wakes. It said in my voice, "This was never yours." My throat constricted. I had no memory of ever seeing that token before, but the sight of it pulled something deep in my chest, a recognition like a half-forgotten dream. The passengers swayed. The ferry itself groaned beneath us, metal protesting against pressure it was never built to withstand. I tried to speak, but the words died in my mouth. The double stepped closer. Its face flickered into visibility, my own features, but warped, stretched as though I'd been painted onto a balloon and pulled at the edges. The eyes weren't mine. They were flat gray, the same color as the fog pressing against the windows. "You stayed too late," it whispered again, "and you took the wrong ferry." I broke, shoved past the nearest passengers, their arms brushing cold against my shoulders, their eyes rolling, but their bodies never resisting. I bolted down the corridor, lungs straining, heart hammering. Every step made the floor flex like rubber. Every breath filled me with that burnt plastic stink. The stairwell loomed. This time, when I opened the door, there wasn't blackness, but a strange, weak light. Pale yellow, flickering like fire seen through water. Against my better judgment, I climbed. Each step groaned underfoot. Halfway up, I heard the voices rise below me, chanting again, but distorted, breaking apart syllables until it sounded less like words and more like the ferry's engine coughing. I didn't look back. At the top, I shoved open another door and staggered into the upper deck. It wasn't the ferry anymore. The benches were gone. The walls stretched wider, curving like a hanger. The ceiling arched too high, vanishing into shadows. The air was warmer here, humid enough to bead sweat on my forehead. And at the far end, where the captain's bridge should have been, a massive window looked out onto something impossible. Not the harbor, not the skyline. An endless expanse of water. Yes, but hanging above it, tilted wrong, was the city itself. Manhattan, sideways, its skyscrapers lying horizontal like a toppled diorama, lights flickering in the mist as though the whole island had been set afloat and left to drift. The ferry kept moving toward it, but the water didn't ripple. It didn't move at all. It looked solid, black, a painted surface, while the city above glowed faintly as though alive. A sound behind me made my skin crawl. The passengers were coming. Their feet shuffled against the floor, not hurried, but relentless. I pressed forward. My shoes squeaked against slick flooring, and as I neared the front, I saw shapes moving in the glass, reflections that weren't mine. People leaning close on the other side, hands pressed to the invisible barrier, eyes wide. Their lips moved, but I couldn't hear them. I squinted, trying to read the words, and one face, so close to my own it could have been a cousin, formed the phrase clearly, "Jump!" The chanting behind me grew louder. A dozen voices, then 24 rattling the air, shaking the window. My teeth vibrated. I couldn't think. The reflection mouthed again, "Jump!" I pressed my hand to the glass. It was warm, throbbing with a pulse that matched my own. Then, without warning, the ferry jerked and the lights went out again. Total blackness. My reflection vanished. In the dark, their voices rose all around me. "Not yours, not yours, not yours." I spun, desperate. Somewhere to run, somewhere to hide. My hand found the metal lip of the window frame, and then the glass cracked beneath my palm. A hairline fissure spread outward with a sound like ice breaking on a winter lake. Cold air hissed through. The chanting stopped. Every passenger fell silent, as if waiting. And then, the double's voice again, close, whispering against my ear, though no one stood beside me. "You break it, you take it." The crack widened. Salt water poured through, burning my skin where it touched. The smell overwhelmed me, like rust and blood mixed together. I staggered back, my shoes slipping. The ferry shuddered, tilted. Somewhere in the dark, passengers collapsed against the walls, their bodies thudding like sacks of wet sand. I knew then I had no choice. The ferry wasn't going back to Staten Island. It wasn't going anywhere real. I ran. My shoulder hit the glass, and it gave way. Water swallowed me whole. But it wasn't water. It was thicker, colder, slick as oil. It forced its way up my nose, down my throat, until every breath was a fight. And when I looked up through the black tide, I didn't see surface waves or stars. I saw windows. Hundreds, thousands of them, stacked in impossible directions, each glowing faintly yellow. Inside each one was a figure. Some looked like passengers. Some looked like me, all staring, all waiting. And then, just before I lost consciousness, something vast shifted between them. Something I couldn't see fully, only feel. Pressure, intelligence, hunger. My vision closed like a shutter. When I woke, I was on the deck. Salt crusted my lips, my clothes plastered to my skin as though I'd crawled out of the Atlantic. But the deck wasn't the one I knew. The paint was blistered, the benches rotted through, and rust streaked the walls in rivulets like dried blood. The ferry looked abandoned, as if it had been left out here for decades. I sat up too fast, coughing brine, and scanned the horizon. Nothing. No skyline, no lights, no other boats. Just flat water in every direction, gray and still, stretching further than my eyes could make sense of. Above me, the sky wasn't dark or light, but a kind of oppressive twilight, colorless, sunless. The air was damp and smelled of iron. I staggered to my feet. Every step echoed hollow through the deck, louder than it should have been, like the sound had no place to go. I reached the rail and peered down. The water was wrong. No waves, just a surface like glass. And beneath it, faint glows, rows of windows, whole blocks of them. The drowned city. I squeezed my eyes shut. You're dreaming, I told myself. This isn't real. This is just your brain misfiring. But the ferry groaned, and something moved below, a shadow bigger than any vessel, sliding beneath the glassy surface. I felt it pass under me like a train rumbling beneath subway grates, a weight so massive my knees nearly buckled. When I opened my eyes, there was someone else standing across the deck. It was me. Not the stretched-faced double from before, but me exactly, standing there dripping wet, staring with hollow calm. He didn't move at first, just watched, head tilted slightly, like he was cataloging me. Then he spoke, and hearing my own voice outside my mouth made my stomach twist. "You got off," he said. "But you weren't supposed to." I backed toward the rail, fingers slick on the rust. "What do you want?" His lips barely moved. "It doesn't want me. It wants you." Something cracked the silence, the distant echo of a bell, a ferry horn, mournful and low, rolling across the water from nowhere. The sound vibrated through my bones, through the deck beneath my feet. My double glanced over my shoulder, eyes narrowing. "It's here." I spun to look. Out in the gray distance, shapes were materializing. Ferries. Not one, but dozens, maybe hundreds, all identical, all sliding silently across the water toward me. Some had lights in their windows, flickering faintly. Others were dark, but I swore I saw silhouettes pressed against the glass. The double stepped closer. I flinched, but he didn't raise a hand. He only whispered, "You'll board one. Everyone does, but it won't take you back." The deck shook violently. I dropped to my knees, clutching the railing. Out on the horizon, the nearest ferry tilted, its bow rising out of the water as if something had hooked it from below. Metal shrieked. A wave surged outward in slow motion, not cresting or breaking, just bulging like a swell of muscle. The double's face rippled, blurring like a reflection disturbed by water. His features smeared, then reformed. He was still me, but not fixed, like I was looking at myself through a pane of warped glass. "You can't leave," he said, "but you can survive." "How?" I croaked. He opened his hand. The token was there again, the silver coin with the jagged circle. "Take it back." I reached for it. My fingers brushed the cold metal, and for an instant I wasn't on the ferry anymore. I was underwater again, staring through rows of glowing windows at countless versions of myself, some pounding on the glass, some sitting motionless, some already bloated and blue with rot. A hand gripped mine. Not my doubles, something larger, stronger, pulling from beneath the surface. Nails dug into my palm. The pressure burned like fire. I screamed and ripped my hand away. When I blinked, I was alone, the deck empty, the token gone. My double vanished. But the fairies kept coming, their shapes blotting out the horizon, their horns wailing in long, slow unison. I ran, across the deck, down the corroded stairwell, through corridors lined with peeling paint and shattered glass. Every step echoed too long, as though the fairies' guts were hollow. I didn't stop until I found a door cracked open to the outside. I shoved through, burst onto the aft deck, and found the skyline there. New York. Real and glittering, just a mile away. The towers rising black against the night, their windows alive with familiar yellow light. My heart leapt. I screamed for help, waved my arms. But the skyline didn't get closer. The ferry kept moving, yet the city stayed where it was, fixed like a mural painted on the fog. I leaned against the rail, sobbing. My breath came out in gasps, sharp and painful. And then something changed. The skyline blinked, the lights went out, every single one, all at once, for just a second, and when they came back on, I saw it clearly. Not buildings, but windows, the same as the drowned city, the same endless grid, and in one of them, higher than the rest, I saw myself looking down. The deck groaned beneath me, and the ferry tilted hard, sending me sprawling. I grabbed the rail, screaming, as the entire vessel lurched toward that impossible city. The water rose up around me, black and unbroken, swallowing everything. The rail bit into my palms as the ferry listed, the skyline swelling larger until it filled the horizon, until it wasn't a skyline at all but a wall of windows pressing down on me. They weren't skyscrapers, they were cells, compartments, thousands stacked upon thousands, some glowing, some black. And in those that glowed, I saw people, not strangers, me. Versions of myself, hunched in shadow, standing in corners, clawing at glass, screaming soundlessly. One sat perfectly still, staring forward like a mannequin. Another pressed its hands to the window, lips shaping words I couldn't hear. A third beat its fists until its skin tore open, blood smearing the glass. The ferry surged toward them. The water didn't resist. It parted like silk, and the prow slid into blackness as if entering a tunnel. I staggered back. My legs barely responded, like gravity itself was heavier here. My ears popped. The chanting started again. Faint at first, then building. Not from the passengers now, but from the windows themselves. Every mouth and every compartment moved in unison. You stayed too late. You stayed too late. The lights on the ferry flickered violently. Rust flakes rained from the ceiling. Somewhere metal tore like fabric, long and shrill, echoing forever. I bolted down the corridor, not thinking, only moving. I knew the layout by muscle memory, but every door led to somewhere wrong. The mess hall stretched 100 yards too long, with tables endlessly repeating. The stairwell looped back on itself. I climbed 3 flights and came out the same door I'd entered. Everywhere I ran, the voices followed. Not yours, not yours, not yours. I turned a corner and froze. At the end of the hallway stood the double. My double. But he wasn't alone. Behind him stretched a line of duplicates, dozens, all of them me. Faces slack, clothes dripping, eyes gray as fog. Each held out the token, silver and sharp-edged, glinting in the flicker. One spoke. You took it first. Another joined. Now take it back. I backed up until my shoulders hit a bulkhead door. I couldn't breathe. The air pressed in, hot and wet, carrying the stink of salt and rust. The first double stepped closer, palm outstretched. The token quivered, catching light that didn't come from anywhere. I thought of every passenger staring, of every window with a trapped version of me, of the black water pressing up from below. And I realized what they wanted. They weren't trying to keep me prisoner. They were trying to trade. I don't remember deciding. My hand just moved, trembling, reaching for the coin. My fingers brushed its surface, and the world folded. I was choking. Real air. Diesel and salt and sweat. The kind of humid stink I'd known every day of my commute. My eyes flew open, and I was back on the ferry. The real ferry. Bright lights overhead, orange benches. The rumble of engines steady and familiar. The passengers were normal, talking, laughing, scrolling their phones. I was on the floor by the aft stairwell, drenched in seawater, gasping like a drowning man. A woman knelt near me, eyes wide with alarm. "Jesus, are you okay? You need help?" I tried to answer, but my throat seized. I could only nod. She helped me up. My clothes dripped onto the tile. My shoes squelched. A few commuters glanced over, frowning, but no one stared too long. No one pointed, no one chanted. The ferry's PA crackled. "We'll be docking at St. George shortly. Please make sure you have all belongings." Normal. Perfectly normal. And yet, my hand burned. I looked down. My palm was clenched tight around something cold. I forced my fingers open. The token sat there. Silver. Jagged circle etched deep, lines catching the fluorescent light. No one else noticed. Not the woman who'd helped me. Not the passengers. Not the crew. Only me. When the ferry docked, I stepped off like I always had, heart pounding so loud it felt like it shook my ribs. The city spread before me, alive and familiar, but I couldn't shake the silence of that other place. The faces in the windows. And now, every night, I hear it. The ferry horn. Low and mournful, cutting through my apartment walls, even though I live miles from the water. And sometimes when I close my eyes, I see a reflection in the glass that isn't quite mine. It's waiting. I know one day I'll hear the voice again. "You stayed too late." And when that happens, I don't think I'll come back. I've always said there are parts of the Appalachian Mountains that feel older than the world itself, places where the trees lean in on you, and the silence feels like a living thing, pressing against your chest. My name's Daniel. I'm 46 years old, and I've spent much of my life exploring the backroads and trails of America in an old RV I bought secondhand a decade ago. I've had my share of close calls on the road, storms, breakdowns, even a bear nosing around my campsite once. But nothing prepared me for what I went through on the ridges of southern West Virginia last fall. I'd been driving for days, chasing that shifting golden edge of autumn where the leaves haven't quite fallen, but the air's already sharpened. I wanted solitude. The kind you can't find in crowded campgrounds with electric hookups and noisy neighbors. I wanted quiet. Peace. Maybe that was my mistake, looking for peace in a part of the country that doesn't give it freely. The campground I found wasn't listed on any of the apps I use, not even the old Forest Service maps. Just a brown, weather-beaten sign along a county road half hidden by brush, Hollow Creek Camp. I almost drove past it, but something made me slow down. The gravel entrance was overgrown, but wide enough for my RV. It looked abandoned, maybe even forgotten, but the gate stood open as if waiting. I figured, why not? A quiet night, no one around, just me in the woods. The road wound uphill, the gravel crunching under my tires, until the trees opened into a clearing with 6 old pads for campers. Most were cracked, weeds poking through, but they were level, and that was enough for me. I backed in, cut the engine, and the silence came rushing back so heavy it felt like sound itself had been stolen. No birds, no distant hum of traffic, just the long hush of the mountains. I told myself it was perfect. The first hours were calm. I walked a loop around the clearing, found an old picnic shelter with half its roof caved in and a trail marker leaning at an angle, the paint almost worn away. The trail pointed east, deeper into the trees, with the name barely legible, Forgotten Ridge. I traced the letters with my finger, feeling a roughness beneath, like the wood had been burned or carved over at some point. I should have stopped thinking about it then, gone back, and fixed myself dinner in the RV. But you know how curiosity works. It creeps in quiet, disguises itself as harmless. I thought, tomorrow I'll hike it, just to see where it goes. That night, though, something felt wrong. I cooked some canned stew, sat outside in a camp chair, and watched the stars through the gaps in the trees. The air was cold enough to bite at my ears, but the fire I built kept me warm. It should have been perfect, but the longer I sat there, the more I noticed how the woods weren't resting the way they should. You camp long enough, you learn the rhythms. Crickets, owls, maybe a coyote calling. Here, the silence didn't shift. It stayed heavy, like the air before a storm, though the stars burned clear overhead. Around 10, I heard it. A single crack, like a branch breaking, deep in the trees. I leaned forward, listening, and for a moment there was nothing. Then another crack, not the quick snap of a deer moving through brush, but slow, deliberate, as if something heavy pressed down on wood until it gave way. I waited, telling myself it was just an animal, maybe even the wind working through deadfall. But no wind stirred, no leaves moved. I doused the fire earlier than usual, crawled into the RV, and locked the door. I lay in bed listening, every nerve awake. The silence stretched out, pressing closer, until finally, I drifted off. When I woke, the RV felt colder than it should have, even with the heater humming. My breath fogged faintly, like the air itself had thinned overnight. I made coffee, trying to shake it off, but when I stepped outside, I noticed something I couldn't ignore. There were footprints in the gravel. Not mine. I could see where my boots had pressed near the fire pit, but these were different. Bare feet. Long, narrow. The gravel around them was disturbed, like whoever made them walked heavy, dragging slightly. They circled my RV once, slow and meandering, before disappearing into the trees at the trailhead of Forgotten Ridge. I stood there a long time, mug trembling in my hand. I tried to make sense of it. Maybe some local kid messing with me, though who walks barefoot in 40-degree weather? Maybe someone living rough out here, though the prints were too clean, too precise. No broken pattern, no hesitation. I should have packed up, driven away. But a part of me wanted to believe it was nothing. My pride got in the way, the voice that says you're overreacting, that leaving would mean admitting fear. I told myself, stay one more night. Just one more. Then go. To keep myself busy, I decided to hike the trail. The marker for Forgotten Ridge pointed into a corridor of trees so dense the light shifted the moment I stepped beneath them. The air grew cooler, the shadows darker, even though it was mid-morning. The path was faint, but still there, padded with old leaves and edged with moss. As I walked, I noticed carvings on some of the trees, triangular symbols, overlapping lines. At first, I thought they were just hunter's marks, but the deeper I went, the stranger they became. Circles intersecting, arrows pointing downward, a crude shape like a human figure with its head scratched out. Every time I stopped, the woods felt like they held their breath with me. No birds startled, no insects buzzed. Just the creak of my boots and the faint beat of my heart. I told myself I'd go a mile in, then turn back. But when I reached what must have been about that distance, the trail opened into a clearing. And there, at the center, stood a stone structure. It wasn't tall, maybe chest high, but looked deliberate. A stack of flat rocks arranged in a circle, with a hollow in the center blackened as if from fire. Around it lay bones, small ones, squirrels, rabbits, maybe a bird, but arranged carefully in spirals, bleached white against the leaves. My stomach tightened. Every instinct screamed at me to leave. But I just stood there, staring, trying to rationalize. Maybe some old hunting campfire, maybe kids messing around. The explanations felt thin even as I reached for them. Then I heard it again, the crack of a branch. Not behind me this time, but off to the side where the shadows thickened. I turned, but nothing moved. I told myself to walk, steady and calm, back the way I came. And I did. Every step felt heavier, every breath sharper, but I made it back to camp without breaking into a run. The RV never looked so welcoming. I locked myself inside, heart hammering, and tried to convince myself to leave right then. But the day slipped on, and somehow I stayed. Maybe because I was too tired, maybe because I didn't want to admit that something about this place had shaken me so badly. That night, though, things escalated. I was lying in bed, half asleep, when I heard it. 3 knocks, slow, deliberate against the side of the RV. Knock, knock, knock. I froze. My breath caught in my throat, and the silence afterward was so deep it hurt my ears. I wanted to believe it was an animal, but no animal knocks 3 times in a row, evenly spaced, as if announcing itself. I gripped the handle of the kitchen knife I'd left beside the bed and waited. Minutes crawled by. Then, from the woods beyond the clearing, came a sound I will never forget. A voice. Not loud, not close, but calling, faint and ragged, threading through the trees. It was my name. At first, I thought my mind had played a trick on me, some leftover dream tangled up with the waking night. But when I sat up, knife tight in my hand, the voice came again. Daniel. This time it was clearer, drawn out as though whoever spoke it was savoring the syllables. It wasn't angry or threatening, not at first. It was the way someone might call to you from across a yard, half friendly, half inviting. But in the stillness of those woods, it carried an edge I can't put into words. No one should have known my name. I hadn't spoken to a soul since I'd pulled off the county road. I hadn't even checked in. There was no ranger station, no sign-in sheet. Just me, alone. And yet the voice knew who I was. I held still, barely breathing, afraid that any movement might confirm I was listening. The voice came again, closer now, but still muffled by the trees. Daniel, come out. The way it said those words, it was wrong, flat, like a recording played back just slightly off pitch, almost human, but missing something essential. I didn't move, couldn't. I just sat there with my back pressed against the wall of the RV, knife shaking in my hand, my eyes fixed on the black window. I wanted to peek, but every instinct told me not to look, not to give it the satisfaction. The minutes stretched on, silent but for the faint hum of my heater and the rush of blood in my ears. Then I heard it again, 3 knocks, this time from the back of the RV, slow, steady, knock, knock, knock. I nearly dropped the knife. My heart slammed so hard it felt like it might crack my ribs. Whoever, or whatever it was, they had moved without me hearing a single footstep. Gravel should have crunched, branches should have broken, but nothing. Just silence and those deliberate knocks. And then, nothing. The voice didn't come again, no more knocks. Just that deep, unnatural stillness. I must have sat there for hours, wide-eyed in the dark, knife clutched to my chest, until the gray light of morning seeped through the blinds. When I finally stood, my legs trembled so badly I almost collapsed. Stepping outside, I saw the gravel behind my RV had been disturbed. The same footprints as before, bare, long, heavy. They circled the vehicle in a slow, looping path before trailing once more toward the trailhead of Forgotten Ridge. I thought about leaving right then, not even packing properly, just driving until the road spat me back into daylight and noise and the presence of other people. But something stopped me. Fear, yes, but also shame. I didn't want to admit that I'd been driven out by something I couldn't explain. Pride is a dangerous thing, so I stayed one more night. I told myself I'd set a trap of sorts. I'd stay awake, keep the lights low inside the RV, knife close at hand, maybe even get a look at whoever was stalking me. If it was a person, I'd confront them. If it was anything else, at least I'd know. That whole day I tried to keep busy. I cleaned, checked the RV's systems, walked the clearing in tight circles like a caged animal. But as the sun dipped behind the ridges, that same heaviness returned, a pressure that settled into the trees and air, squeezing the world until it felt too small. The silence thickened. Night fell, and then, around midnight, I heard the voice again. Daniel. This time it wasn't far off in the trees. It was right outside the door. I gripped the knife so hard the handle bit into my palm. My breath came fast, ragged, and I prayed the lock would hold. Daniel, open the door. No knock this time, no circling, just the voice, right there. It sounded almost human, but too calm, too patient, like it knew I was listening. I forced myself to stand. Quietly, carefully, I moved toward the small window above the sink, pulling back the corner of the curtain just enough to peer out. At first, I saw nothing, just the clearing, bathed in faint starlight. Then, at the edge of the trees, I saw a movement, a figure. Tall, thin, its outline blurred by the shadows. It stood perfectly still, facing the RV, though I couldn't make out its features. What I did see were its arms, too long. Hanging almost to its knees, motionless at its sides. It didn't step forward, didn't wave, just stood there. I dropped the curtain and staggered back, heart rattling like a trapped bird. The voice came again, louder now, though the figure hadn't moved. Daniel, come out. I don't know how long I stayed frozen there, minutes, maybe hours. But at some point the voice stopped. When I dared to look again, the figure was gone. The clearing stood empty, silent as ever. When dawn broke, I was already packed. I didn't care about pride anymore or what leaving meant. I just wanted out. My hands shook as I cranked the ignition, the engine coughing to life, and relief swelled when the RV rolled forward down the gravel road. But halfway down, I saw something that made me slam the brakes so hard everything inside lurched. The trail marker for Forgotten Ridge, where it had leaned crooked, weathered, and old, was gone. In its place, freshly planted in the earth, was a new post. Tall, straight, the wood pale and unmarked, and carved into it in letters deep enough to catch the morning light was my name, Daniel. I stared at it until my vision blurred, my whole body trembling. Then I floored it, bouncing down the road until the county pavement appeared like salvation. I didn't look back once. For miles, I drove in silence, hands locked on the wheel, heart still slamming. I told myself I'd never go back, that I'd put Hollow Creek Camp out of my mind forever. But the truth is, it hasn't let me go. Even now, nights on the road, I'll wake to silence heavier than it should be. I'll think I hear something outside, the crack of a branch, the faintest whisper of my name threading through the trees, and I know, deep down, that trail is still out there, waiting for me to come back. I thought leaving would have been the end of it, that if I drove fast enough, far enough, the memory of Hollow Creek Camp would fade into the blur of all the other places I'd passed through in my years of RV wandering. But that isn't how fear works. Fear doesn't leave when you leave a place. It follows. It waits. It finds cracks in your mind to crawl back through. That whole day, I pushed the RV hard, driving across ridges and valleys, through two-lane towns with shuttered storefronts and rusting cars left to rot on cinder blocks. I didn't stop except to refuel, and even then I caught myself glancing over my shoulder, scanning the tree lines at the edge of the stations. No one called my name, but the silence seemed to press in even when I was surrounded by people. By dusk, exhaustion forced me to stop. I found a small state-run campground along the New River, the kind with numbered pads and families barbecuing. Laughter carried through the trees and radios played tinny country songs. It should have comforted me. I told myself, here you're safe. Here you're among people. And for a few hours, I almost believed it. I cooked a proper meal, sat outside, listened to kids chase each other with flashlights between the campsites. The normalcy felt like medicine. But sometime around midnight, after the laughter had died down and the fires had burned to embers, I heard it again. Not a knock this time. Not even a voice. Just the sound of gravel shifting outside my RV. Slow, measured, like footsteps. I froze in bed, staring at the ceiling, every nerve awake. I told myself it was just another camper coming back from the bathrooms. Nothing strange about that. But the steps stopped right outside my door. And then I heard the faint scrape of fingernails against the metal. Long, drawn out. I didn't move, couldn't. My chest tightened until every breath was shallow and quick. After a moment, the sound stopped. The silence pressed close again, and I lay there until dawn painted the windows gray. When I finally stepped outside, the gravel looked undisturbed. No footprints, no signs of anyone. I told myself I imagined it. But when I turned to close the RV door, I saw something that made my knees buckle. On the thin layer of condensation that had formed on the glass window overnight, there was a word written with a fingertip. Daniel. I scrubbed it away with my sleeve until the glass smeared, heart pounding like a trapped bird. I left that campground without even dumping my tanks. I just drove. For days, I kept moving, from Virginia into Tennessee, across the Smokies into North Carolina. I stuck to busier highways, stopped only at well-lit truck stops, surrounded myself with noise and people whenever I could. But none of it mattered. No matter how far I went, the signs followed. Sometimes it was the footprints, bare, narrow, pressed heavy into gravel near the edge of a lot. Sometimes it was the sound of knocks in the middle of the night, though never loud enough to wake anyone else. Once, parked at a Walmart overnight, I woke to find a symbol drawn in the dust on my back window. A circle intersected with a downward arrow, one of the same symbols I'd seen carved into the trees along Forgotten Ridge. And then the voice started again. Always at night, always soft, always patient. Sometimes it was just my name stretched into the dark. Other times it was something else. Come back. Or worse, you belong here. The thing is, it never shouted. It never sounded angry. It was calm, gentle, and that made it worse, like it knew something I didn't, like it had all the time in the world to wait for me. I tried talking about it once. At a diner in Asheville, I struck up conversation with an old man who looked like he'd spent his whole life in those mountains. I don't even know why I brought it up, but something about his eyes, clear, sharp, like he'd seen things others hadn't, made me think maybe he'd understand. I told him about Hollow Creek Camp, the footprints, the voice, the trail called Forgotten Ridge. For a long time, he just stared at me. Then he shook his head slow, like he was disappointed, or maybe just resigned. "You should have never gone up that way," he said finally. His voice was gravelly, worn thin. "That place don't forget you once you step in it." "What does that mean?" I asked. My voice cracked more than I wanted it to. He leaned closer across the table, his coffee untouched, and said something I still hear in my sleep. "Some trails you walk once, that's all it takes. They walk you back, whether you like it or not." I wanted to ask more, to demand answers, but his expression closed off and he wouldn't look at me again. I left money on the counter and stumbled out into the daylight, feeling the weight of his words pressing like stones on my chest. That night, parked in a crowded RV park outside Boone, I locked every window, every door, drew every curtain. I sat awake, knife in my lap, waiting. Hours passed, my body aching with exhaustion. At some point, my head dipped, sleep tugging me down. That's when I heard it, the knocks. Not on the side of the RV this time, not on the back, on the roof. 3 of them, heavy, deliberate, knock, knock, knock. I snapped upright, knife shaking in my grip. The roof groaned faintly under the weight of something shifting above me. I held my breath, waiting for another knock. Instead, I heard the sound of movement, slow, crawling, like hands and knees dragging across the metal. I wanted to scream, to bolt outside and draw attention from the other campers. But fear pinned me down, colder than ice. The crawling moved across the length of the roof, then stopped above the bed where I sat frozen. The silence that followed was unbearable. I could hear the faint creak of metal under pressure, like something leaning down, pressing close. And then, so faint I almost doubted it, I heard a whisper through the ceiling. "Daniel." I don't remember how I made it through that night. My body must have shut down from sheer terror, because the next thing I knew, sunlight was streaming through the blinds. I bolted outside, searching for footprints, scratches, anything. The roof was bare, clean, not a mark. But I knew what I'd heard, and I knew the old man had been right. Some trails you only walk once, but they walk you back whether you like it or not. After that night on the roof, I stopped pretending I could just outdrive it. The fear had shifted. It wasn't about leaving Hollow Creek behind anymore. It was about the realization that it hadn't stayed there. I'd carried it with me, or maybe it had carried me. Every stop became a negotiation with myself. I avoided quiet places. I stuck to lots with lights, sounds, people. But no matter how crowded the campground, no matter how busy the truck stop, the signs still came. At first, small. A reflection in the RV's window that didn't quite line up with me. A faint smear of handprints across the back door, pressed from the outside in the condensation. Once in Kentucky, I woke to find all the cabinets inside my RV standing open, though I knew I'd latched them. But the worst were the voices, not just calling my name anymore. They changed, multiplied. Sometimes it was a whisper, so close it felt like someone breathing into my ear. Sometimes it was a chorus, faint and ragged as if drifting up from beneath the floor. But always, always, they said the same thing. Come back. I'd wake drenched in sweat, knife clenched so hard my hand ached, convinced that if I closed my eyes again, something would be standing in the narrow aisle between my bed and the door. One evening, in a rest area outside Johnson City, I hit a breaking point. The lot was half full of truckers bedding down, engines humming, the air filled with the smell of diesel. I thought that kind of noise would keep me safe. I sat at the table eating a sandwich when I heard it. A knock. Not outside. Not on the roof. From inside the RV. I froze, every hair on my arm standing up. The knock had come from the bathroom door, 6 feet away. Slow. Deliberate. Knock. 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 My knife was already in my hand, though I couldn't remember grabbing it. I forced myself to stand, legs quaking, and inched toward the bathroom. The door stood closed, the small brass knob glinting in the dim light. My throat was so dry I could barely swallow. With one shaking hand, I reached for the knob, knife ready in the other. I yanked it open. Nothing. Just the small, cramped space, the mirror, the sink, the faint drip of the faucet I'd been meaning to fix. But on the mirror, written in long, streaked letters across the fogged glass, was my name. Not written once, not even twice. It covered the glass, my name over and over, dozens of times, smeared with a wet fingertip, some letters shaky, some carved deep into the condensation like scratches. I slammed the door shut and stumbled back, gasping like I'd been underwater. My vision tunneled, and for a moment, I thought I'd black out. That was the first night I seriously thought about abandoning the RV, just walking away, leaving everything behind, taking a bus or a plane back west and pretending this life on the road had never been mine. But even as the thought came, another voice whispered just beneath it, cold and certain. It doesn't matter where you go. It will find you. The days blurred after that. Fear hollowed me out. I stopped sleeping more than an hour at a time, jerking awake at every sound. My hands shook so badly I spilled coffee, dropped tools, cut myself trying to slice bread. I started avoiding mirrors, avoiding windows, afraid of what I might see. And then came the smell. At first, faint, a sour, earthy stench that clung to the air inside the RV no matter how much I cleaned. It reminded me of wet leaves, of soil turned over after rain, but stronger, rotting, almost animal. I checked the tanks, the vents, every corner for mold or leaks. Nothing. The smell would come and go, lingering for hours before fading, always strongest at night. One night, pulled into a small private campground in North Carolina, the smell grew so thick it made my stomach turn. I gagged, opening every window, spraying disinfectant until my eyes watered. It didn't help. It was as if the air itself was spoiled. I fled outside, pacing the gravel, breathing deep gulps of cold mountain air until my head stopped spinning. And that's when I saw them. Symbols, carved into the dirt beside my RV. Dozens of them, shallow grooves etched into the gravel as though with a finger dragged through dust. Circles, arrows, overlapping lines, the same ones I'd seen on the trees back at Forgotten Ridge. And in the center of them all, drawn darker, deeper, was that crude human figure with its head scratched out. I staggered back, bile burning my throat. My heart pounded so violently I thought it might stop. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat in the driver's seat, headlights off, hands gripping the wheel, staring into the black trees beyond the edge of camp. And just before dawn, when the sky was paling, I saw movement. At first, I thought it was another camper heading out early. But the figure that stepped out of the trees wasn't carrying gear, wasn't walking toward a car. It was tall. Too tall. Its arms dangled unnaturally low, and its head seemed slightly cocked as if studying the rows of campers. It didn't move fast. It just stood there, half hidden by the fog, scanning the lot. When its head turned toward me, I dropped down out of sight, chest heaving, teeth clenched to stop from making a sound. When I dared look again, it was gone. But the smell lingered. The days after that bled together in a haze of exhaustion and paranoia. I started seeing the figure more often, always at a distance, always half hidden, a glimpse between trees, a shadow crossing an empty road, once in my side mirror standing just at the edge of the highway as I sped past, never close, not yet, but always watching. By then I knew I couldn't keep running. I'd driven hundreds of miles, crossed state lines, surrounded myself with strangers, and still it followed. There was no outrunning something that wasn't bound by distance. And the worst part? Some nights, when I woke to the silence pressing against the RV, I felt something in me begin to bend, a thought I couldn't shake. Maybe it would be easier just to go back to Hollow Creek, back to Forgotten Ridge, back to the place that had started it all. Because if the trail could walk me back, maybe I didn't have a choice. The thought of going back settled into me like a splinter. At first, I resisted it, pushed it away every time it surfaced. But the more I tried to fight it, the sharper it became, pressing deeper until it felt like it was part of me. Every night, the voices grew more insistent. Daniel, come back. You belong here. They threaded through my dreams, whispering behind walls, humming in the static of the radio. Sometimes I'd wake certain I'd heard them from the passenger seat, as if someone had been sitting there the whole time watching me drive. I told myself I was losing my mind. Sleep deprivation, paranoia, maybe some kind of breakdown. I tried to rationalize, but fear doesn't bend to reason. It seeps in, fills the cracks, makes its own logic. And mine was becoming clear. I could keep running forever, or I could turn around and face it. The choice gnawed at me for days. I kept driving south, stopping in crowded places, but the signs followed. Bare footprints in the gravel at a truck stop in Georgia. My name scratched faintly into the frost on my windshield outside Knoxville. Once, parked on the shoulder to rest, I woke to find all the lights in the RV flickering in unison, buzzing like insects. Each time, the smell was there too. Damp earth, rot, the reek of Forgotten Ridge. And slowly a strange calm settled over me. Not relief, never that, but the grim clarity of someone who realizes there's only one way out. One night, camped outside a small town in North Carolina, I finally spoke the thought out loud. Fine, I whispered into the silence. I'll go back. The air seemed to shift. The smell thickened for a moment, then faded, as if the woods themselves had exhaled. And for the first time in weeks, I slept through the night without waking. That sealed it. The next morning, I turned the RV north. The drive back through those mountains felt different, heavier, as though the ridges themselves leaned closer, guiding me. Roads I didn't remember taking before seemed clearer now, like I'd been on them all along. My GPS lost signal, but I didn't need it. I knew where I was going. Back to Hollow Creek Camp. The gravel road was just as overgrown as before, the brush clawing at the sides of the RV as I crawled up the incline. The clearing opened the same way it had, cracked paths scattered with weeds, the air unnaturally still. But something was different. The old picnic shelter was gone. The caved-in roof, the leaning posts, vanished as if it had never existed. The trail marker, too. No crooked, weathered post, no fresh one carved with my name, just an open mouth of trees where the trail began. And yet, I knew it was waiting. I parked the RV in the same spot, engine idling for a moment longer than I meant to. My hands trembled on the wheel. Every part of me screamed to put it in reverse, back down the road, never stop driving. But I killed the engine. Stepped out, the silence swallowed me whole. I walked to the trailhead. The air grew cooler, darker, just as it had before. My boots sank into soft earth. Shadows thickened. Every breath echoed, and then I heard it. Footsteps. Not behind me, not ahead. All around, slow. Bare, crunching on leaves, circling. I froze, knife already in my hand, spinning, but nothing moved. The woods looked empty. Still, the steps came, and then the voice. Closer than ever, soft and patient, curling into my ear as though it had leaned down to speak directly into me. Welcome back, Daniel. My stomach dropped. My legs nearly gave out, but I forced myself forward, one step, then another, deeper into the trail. The symbols appeared again on the trees, carved deeper this time, cleaner, fresher. Triangles, circles, figures with their heads scratched out. They glowed faintly in the dim light, as though slick with something wet. The air thickened with that smell. Soil, rot, something older, fouler beneath it, like breath from a mouth that hadn't opened in centuries. I reached the clearing where I'd seen the stone circle before. Only now, it was different. The stones weren't just piled in a chest-high ring. They were taller, stacked into rough pillars, jagged shapes that leaned inward, forming a crude arch over the blackened hollow. Bones still littered the ground, but larger now, not just rabbits and squirrels, deer, maybe even something bigger. The spirals wound outward, neat and deliberate, like hands had placed each one with care. And in the center of it all, rising from the hollow, was something new. A figure, not stone, not wood. Something in between. Its shape was human, tall and thin, arms too long, head cocked at that same unnatural angle I'd glimpsed from a distance. It wasn't moving, just standing, waiting. The voice came again. You came back. This time it wasn't from the trees, it came from the figure itself. Flat. Patient. Almost kind. I gripped the knife tighter, though I knew it was useless. My throat worked, but no words came. You belong here, it said. You always did. The clearing seemed to pulse, shadows bending closer, the air pressing heavier. My knees shook. The rational part of me screamed to run, to get back to the RV, to drive until the road gave out. But another part, a deeper, quieter part, felt the pull. Because for all the terror, for all the dread, there was a strange recognition in that voice. A familiarity I couldn't explain, as if I'd heard it, not just on the trail, not just in my dreams, but long before. As if it had been waiting my whole life. And the worst part? Some part of me wanted to step forward. My boots felt rooted to the ground. Every nerve screamed at me to turn back, but the figure's stillness held me in place, like gravity bending toward it. It wasn't alive, not in the way people are. Its body seemed carved, grown, assembled. I could see places where bark met bone, where stone had fused with something that looked disturbingly like sinew. Its face, if it could be called that, was smooth, featureless, yet somehow I felt its gaze on me. Why me? I finally rasped, my voice breaking the silence. The figure tilted its head, not sharply, not mechanical, slowly, like it was considering me. You heard us, it said. That is enough. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry. I didn't want to hear. I tried to leave. And yet you returned. The clearing shifted. I swear the shadows around me bent inward, trees leaning closer, the carved spirals on the ground pulsing faintly as though alive. The air pressed down on my chest. You belong here, the voice repeated. This place remembers. I thought about the names on the posts, the ones carved before mine. Jack, May, Thomas. Names worn by time, eroded but not gone. Did they all come back? Did they all stand where I was standing now, feeling the same pull, the same unbearable mixture of terror and recognition? I forced myself to move, one step back. My boot crunched leaves, and the sound was loud in the clearing. The figure didn't advance. It just stood there, head tilted, arms hanging unnaturally long. But the voice came again, firmer this time, resonating through the trees. Do not turn away. I froze, knife shaking in my grip. A low rustling began in the woods. Not wind, not animals. Something else. Shapes flickered between the trunks, pale against the darkness. At first I thought it was mist, but then I realized they had form. Faces blurred but human, bodies that seemed to waver in and out of being. They stood just beyond the stones, dozens of them, maybe more, watching in silence. I couldn't breathe. My chest locked tight. Who are they? I whispered. The figure shifted, its arms lifting slightly. They are us. They are you. They are the ones who came before and the ones who never left. The faces tilted in unison, blank eyes fixed on me. My stomach turned to ice. I stumbled back another step, knife held out, though I knew it was nothing more than a piece of steel against something older than I could imagine. I don't belong here, I said, my voice cracking. I don't. The figure leaned forward, its voice threading into my bones. You already do. You always have. You cannot run from where you began. The air tightened. My ears rang. The faces around the clearing stepped closer, silent, their feet making no sound against the leaves. And then I heard something that nearly buckled me. My own voice. It came from one of the pale figures. Hoarse. Desperate. Daniel, it pleaded, don't fight it. It hurts when you fight it. I whipped toward it, my heart hammering. The figure in the shadows had my outline. My build, my face half-formed, blurry but unmistakable. It was me, or something wearing me. I staggered backward, the bile rising in my throat. The knife slipped in my sweaty hand, almost falling. No, I said. No, that's not me. That's not real. The doppelganger stepped closer, expression flickering between blank and pained as though trapped. Its eyes, my eyes, were wide, begging. "You came back," it said, in my own cadence, my own voice. "You came back because you know, because you've always known." The clearing spun. I couldn't tell if the ground tilted or if it was just me losing balance. Every instinct screamed to run, but my legs barely obeyed. I stumbled toward the trees, knife out, heart slamming. The figure in the center didn't move, but the voice followed. "You can leave the body. You cannot leave the place." The shadows pressed closer, and my doppelganger's voice turned sharp, urgent. "Stop running. It hurts more if you run." I broke into a sprint. The woods blurred, branches whipping my face, roots clawing at my boots, the spirals, the symbols, they seemed burned into my vision, flashing every time I blinked. The whispers chased me, voices all around, mine among them, calling, pleading, commanding. "Daniel, don't fight it. You belong here." My lungs burned, my legs screamed. I tore through the trees, heart jackhammering, until the faint outline of the campground clearing broke ahead. The RV stood there like a lifeline, silver against the dark. I flung myself inside, slamming the door, locking it, twisting the keys. The engine roared. Headlights cut through the dark, but something was wrong. The beams didn't pierce the woods. They bent, diffused as though swallowed. And in their glow, shapes stood. Dozens of them. Pale. Watching. My hands shook on the wheel. I slammed the gas. The RV lurched forward, tires spinning gravel, clawing for traction. Slowly it moved, groaning up the incline, headlights cutting uselessly through shadow. In the mirrors, I saw them. The pale figures. The one that looked like me at the front, watching calmly as I fled. The smell filled the cab, rot, damp earth, old breath. I gagged but kept driving, the engine whining, tires clawing. The clearing faded behind me, swallowed by dark, the figures vanishing into the trees. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I drove until dawn. But even in daylight, the smell lingered. And when I glanced in the side mirror, just for a second, I swore I saw a pale reflection sitting in the passenger seat, watching me with my own eyes. I blinked, and it was gone. But the seatbelt beside me was buckled. I didn't stop driving until the gas gauge hovered near empty. By then, the sun was up, but the light didn't bring relief. It was thin and pale, and the mountains still loomed heavy, like they'd been waiting for me to crawl back into their folds. I pulled into a gas station just off the 2-lane road, one of those lonely ones where the roof over the pump sags and the attendant looks like he's been there for decades. My hands shook so bad I could barely slide the card into the pump. A man in coveralls leaned out from the door, squinting against the daylight. "Long night?" he asked. His voice was casual, but I flinched at the sound of it, hearing the echo of whispers beneath his words. "Yeah," I muttered, keeping my eyes on the pump. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Mountains'll do that. They got long memories out here." My stomach twisted. I looked up sharply, but he'd already gone back inside, leaving the words hanging in the air. I finished filling the tank, climbed back into the RV, and sat there, hands gripping the wheel until the blood drained from my knuckles. The passenger seat beside me was empty now. The buckle hung loose, but I couldn't shake the sensation that someone was still sitting there, watching, waiting. I drove. Hours passed. The roads wound out of the mountains down into flatter country where the trees grew shorter and the ridges less severe. Still, the weight didn't lift. Every shadow seemed too dark. Every hollow in the woods seemed like a mouth opening. That night, I stopped at a small RV park outside a town I didn't bother catching the name of. Families were scattered around, kids running, laughter rising from a campfire circle. Normal life. The kind of life I used to crave. But I didn't join them. I sat inside the RV, curtains drawn, staring at the faint reflection of my own face in the dark glass. Except sometimes it didn't quite look like me. Sometimes the mouth seemed too wide or the eyes too hollow. And once, just once, I swear the reflection smiled when I didn't. I slept with the lights on. Or tried to. Sleep came in broken fits, torn by dreams that felt less like imagination and more like memory. I walked spirals carved into the ground. I saw faces rising from the soil, pale and wordless. And always at the center of the clearing, the figure waited, still patient, knowing I would return. I woke drenched in sweat, sheets twisted, the smell of damp earth clinging to my clothes. The next morning, I drove again, west, away from the mountains, toward places where the land opened wide. But no matter how far I put between myself and those woods, they pressed on me. Sometimes I'd glance in the side mirror and see a figure on the shoulder of the road, standing perfectly still, head tilted, watching me pass. By the time I turned for a second look, it would be gone. Other times, when I stopped for food or gas, I'd catch whispers in the air. Not words at first, just a low sound that raised the hairs on my neck. Then, sometimes, my name. Always my name. Daniel. The worst was when it came in my own voice. I tried telling myself I was unraveling, that it was exhaustion, nerves, maybe trauma from being out there too long. But no matter how I rationalized it, the truth lingered. I'd gone somewhere people weren't meant to go. I'd stood in a place that remembered me, and it wasn't going to forget. Days blurred, states passed beneath my tires. I avoided campgrounds, avoided anything that tied me back to that night. But I couldn't avoid the silence inside the RV, the sense of someone breathing just behind me, always out of view. One evening, parked in a rest stop somewhere in Ohio, I caught myself whispering under my breath without meaning to. Words I didn't know, curling sounds like the carved spirals I'd seen in the dirt. The moment I realized, I bit my tongue hard enough to bleed, the metallic taste filling my mouth. But the whispers didn't stop. They just waited for me to sleep, and every morning the passenger seatbelt was buckled again. I tried everything, leaving it unlatched, removing it, even tying it back with cord. By dawn, it was always fastened, neatly, precisely, as though someone had climbed in beside me during the night. And sometimes, faintly, I swore I saw the indentation of weight pressing into the seat cushion. I kept driving, kept running, but deep down, I knew it didn't matter. The voice in the clearing had been right. You can leave the body. You cannot leave the place. The place was inside me now. I see that night every time I close my eyes, the spirals, the faces, the thing that wore my outline. And I know, sooner or later, I'll go back. Not because I want to, not because I'll choose to, because the mountains don't care about choice, they care about memory, and they remember me. I told myself I wouldn't go back. I said it 100 times over, muttered like a prayer behind the wheel, whispered into the cracks of long, empty highways. But the mountains, they don't need you to say yes. They wait. They pull. By the third week, the pull was stronger than the road. I'd wake up in places I didn't remember parking. I'd open the curtains and see ridges on the horizon, jagged and blue in the distance, even when I was sure I'd driven flatland the day before. The maps didn't add up. The mileage didn't either. It was like the RV itself was being steered, like the tires remembered something I didn't want to. One night, somewhere outside Louisville, I stopped in a Walmart parking lot. The place was lit with too many lamps, buzzing sodium orange, safe in a cheap, artificial way. I thought maybe the light would drown out whatever followed me, but when I woke, the air smelled of moss and wet bark. I pulled the blinds back and my heart froze. Trees. Not the open parking lot, not asphalt under the tires. Pines rising all around, too close, pressing in. The spirals of needles at my feet looked like the ones in the clearing. I didn't remember driving. I don't even think I did. I just sat there, staring through the windshield, my chest tight, lungs locked. And then I heard it. The seatbelt beside me clicking open, slow, deliberate. I didn't look. I couldn't. But in the reflection of the glass, just for a moment, I saw a pale face leaning close. My own face, smiling wide enough to split the skin. I screamed. Not like a man, not even like an animal. Just raw noise tearing out of me until my throat burned. I jammed the key forward, floored the gas, and drove blind through the dark. Branches scraped the sides, snapped off the mirrors, shattered across the roof, until suddenly, blacktop, streetlights, the Walmart parking lot again. But the seatbelt was buckled. I couldn't stop shaking. My body felt thin, stretched, like my skin was one size too small. I pressed my hands to my face and it felt wrong, like I was touching someone else. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. By morning, I'd made my decision. Running wasn't working. Every mile was just another loop in the spiral, curling me back to where I started. And I realized something I'd been too afraid to admit. It wasn't going to end until I went back. Not because I wanted to, because I had no choice. I pointed the RV east. The drive back through Kentucky felt like watching the tape of your own funeral. Everything too quiet, too sharp, the radio fuzzed out no matter the station. Road signs vanished into fog. And in the side mirrors, sometimes I saw the figure following on the shoulder. Always the same. Standing still, head tilted, my shape. I crossed into Virginia, then Tennessee, climbing back toward the range I'd sworn I'd never see again. The mountains rose in front of me, huge and patient, like old gods smiling as I crawled home. It was night when I finally reached the turnoff. That dirt road. The one with the half-collapsed sign I recognized even before my headlights touched it. My chest locked. My hands clamped the wheel so tight I thought my bones would snap, but I drove forward. The path was rougher than before. Branches hung lower. The earth seemed wetter, heavier. I half expected the RV to sink into it, swallowed whole, but it kept going, dragging me deeper until the trees opened up. And there it was. The clearing. The spirals carved into the dirt glistened under the moonlight, deeper than before, darker, like they'd been waiting for me. And at the center stood the figure, still, silent, patient. I parked at the edge, couldn't make myself move at first. My legs felt nailed to the floor, my breath shallow and sharp, but then the passenger door opened, slowly, deliberately, and I felt the air shift, like someone stepped out. My body moved before my mind did. I climbed out, barefoot on the damp ground, and walked forward, step after step into the spiral. The faces in the earth rose again, pale, hollow-eyed, mouths open in silent hunger. But I didn't scream this time. I didn't run. I couldn't. At the center, the figure waited, and in the dark, I saw it more clearly than ever. It wasn't wearing my shape anymore. It was me. Every scar, every wrinkle, every fear etched into its face. I stopped a few feet away, chest heaving. "What do you want?" My voice broke in the night. It tilted its head, smiling that thin, unbearable smile. "You never left," it whispered. "You've been here all along." And I believed it. The spiral closed around me. I should have run. Any sane man would have, but sanity doesn't belong out here. Not in the clearing, not in the Appalachian dark. My breath puffed white in the cold, even though it wasn't that cold when I drove in. The ground beneath me pulsed faintly, as if the soil itself was breathing. Every time my foot pressed down, I swore I felt something push back. The figure, myself, but not, took a step closer. Its bare feet didn't disturb the dirt, didn't even bend the grass. It was weightless, hollow. I wanted to back away, but my body wouldn't listen. My chest shook with shallow gasps. My mind scrambled for prayers I hadn't said since I was a kid, but the words slipped away like water through fingers. "You don't belong anywhere else," it whispered, though its lips didn't move. "The road is a lie. The campsites, the asphalt, the towns, they don't want you. Only this place does. Only us." Behind it, the spirals seemed deeper, gouged into the ground with impossible precision, and in their grooves, water glistened. Not water, black liquid, thick and moving. It shimmered with faint shapes, faces pressing upward, desperate, almost breaking the surface. My stomach heaved. I thought of all the nights on the road where I felt eyes on me, of the strange bends in the highway that brought me back here even when I swore I'd escaped. My hands shook as I gripped my own arms, trying to ground myself, but my skin didn't feel like mine anymore. "I left," I whispered. It sounded weak, pitiful, even to me. "I made it out." The figure tilted its head, smiling wider. My smile. My eyes, but emptier, black pits that didn't catch the moonlight. "You left a shell," it said, "but you stayed. You never stopped walking the spiral. You just pretended the road bent somewhere else." The ground shifted beneath me, subtle but real. The spiral wasn't carved into dirt, it was growing. edges rising, curling, turning into walls, a labyrinth. And the faces in the grooves, they weren't still anymore. They moved, twisting, gasping, their mouths opening and closing like fish dragged from water. Some of them were strangers. Others, God help me, others looked like people I'd seen on the road. A man I passed once at a gas station, a woman at a rest stop, a boy who waved at me through his RV window in Tennessee. All of them stuck here, their features half dissolved, fading into the black liquid. My knees gave. I hit the dirt, breath tearing out of me in ragged bursts. The figure crouched in front of me so close I could see the cracks in its skin, the way it stretched too thin across the skull. "Do you know why it hurts?" it whispered. Its voice wasn't sound, it was vibration in my bones. "Because you are two, one on the road, one here. The spiral doesn't allow halves." I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. "I don't belong here," I choked. "I don't belong anywhere." It grinned wider, splitting the corners of its mouth until dark liquid dripped down its chin. "Exactly." And then it leaned forward, pressing its forehead to mine. I expected cold. Instead, I felt heat, searing, unbearable, like someone poured boiling tar into my skull. My vision whiteouted, my body convulsed. In that instant, I saw flashes. My RV burning in the clearing, my body wandering highways barefoot, my hands carving spirals into the walls of tunnels I'd never been in. I saw dozens of versions, scattered across versions of me, scattered across places I hadn't lived but might have, each one slowly dragged back here. I screamed and shoved it away. The contact broke, and I collapsed onto my side, gagging, clawing at the dirt. The faces below pressed harder, straining toward me, their mouths forming silent words I almost understood. And then I realized I was kneeling in the spiral's center. I hadn't moved my legs, but somehow I was there. The figure straightened. No longer just me, no longer just one shape. It rippled, like dozens of outlines layered together. Men, women, children, all the ones I'd glimpsed in the black liquid, shifting and overlapping until they blurred into one impossible body. The clearing itself seemed to lean in. The trees bowed, the wind died. Even the stars blinked out, swallowed by dark. I felt the pull. Not outside me, inside. The spiral tugged at my ribs, my veins, my marrow. A magnetic drag on the deepest part of me, threatening to unravel everything human I still had left. "No," I rasped, clutching my chest. I won't stay." The figure stilled. Its many voices spoke at once, layered, deafening. "You already are." The ground broke open. The spirals weren't grooves anymore. They were cracks, widening, splitting, yawning into black chasms. The faces below shrieked silently, their jaws stretching wide as hands shot upward, clawing at me, pulling me down. I thrashed, scrambling on hands and knees, but the soil gave way, crumbling beneath me. My palms bled on jagged stone. My legs sank thigh-deep into liquid that burned like acid. The figure didn't move to help. It only watched, smiling, waiting. I screamed, rage mixing with terror. I dug my nails into the dirt, into roots, into anything solid, but the spiral pulled harder. My chest felt like it was caving inward, ribs snapping under invisible pressure. And just when I thought I'd break, when I thought the earth would take me whole, a sound split the air. Not a scream, not wind, a bell. Faint, distant, but sharp, real. The figure twitched, its grin faltering for the first time. The spirals stuttered, their pull loosening by a fraction. I froze, chest heaving. The bell rang again, louder this time, clearer. Somewhere in the dark woods, a church bell was tolling, and for the first time since I'd stepped into that clearing, I felt the possibility of choice. The bell's toll carved through the clearing like a blade. One heavy strike. A pause, another. Each note vibrated in my bones, steadier, louder, echoing in the hollow chambers of my skull. I couldn't place the direction, north, south, east, but it cut through everything. Through the whispers, through the spiral's pull, through the figure's thousand-layered voice. The ground beneath me quaked. The cracks spasmed and stopped widening. The faces in the black liquid shuddered, their mouths frozen mid-scream, as if even they were listening. The figure shifted. For the first time it looked uncertain. Its grin faltered, its outlines rippling faster, losing shape. I clawed my way higher, dragging myself out of the spiral's center. My legs burned, every muscle shaking. Tar clung to my ankles, hissing where it touched skin. But the bell rang again, and the tar recoiled. It recoiled. I staggered onto my knees, sucking air. My vision spun, my ears rang. The figure spoke, but its voices no longer aligned. They clashed, fighting each other, breaking apart. "You can't," one hissed. "You belong," another moaned. "Stay. Go. Nothing waits out there." The spirals pulsed like a dying heartbeat. And in that fragile moment, the thought bloomed in my chest like fire. The bell means a way out. I didn't question it. If I stopped to doubt, I'd be lost. I lurched forward, stumbling toward the tree line. The forest pressed against me with suffocating stillness, branches arching low as if to bar my way. But the bell rang again, and they bent back just enough for me to slip through. The figure screamed. Not with one voice, with all of them. A chorus of anguish that rattled the leaves that made the ground tremble. I ran. Branches tore at my arms, my face. Roots tried to trip me. But every strike of the bell was like a hand on my back, shoving me onward. Behind me, the figure crashed through the trees, its shape flickering, unraveling, arms stretching too long, faces surfacing from its torso like drowning victims. The bell rang again, and I broke into a clearing. Not the clearing, another one. Smaller, ringed with oaks. At its center, an old stone bell tower. Crumbling, leaning, forgotten. The bell swayed in its frame, though no wind touched it. Its rope, frayed and green with moss, swung as if an unseen hand pulled it. I fell to my knees before it, chest heaving, vision swimming. The figure lurched from the tree line, dragging the spiral with it. The cracks spread beneath its feet, spiraling outward, threatening to consume this clearing too. I grabbed the rope, my hands burned. The moss crumbled into slime under my grip. The figure shrieked, a dozen mouths opening across its body, all black with tar. "Don't," it pleaded. Or maybe it commanded. "You'll only trade one prison for another." I pulled. The bell boomed above me, deafening, shaking dust from the stone walls. The cracks in the ground froze. The figure convulsed, its body jerking, faces distorting. Tar poured from its wounds like blood. I pulled again. The second toll hit harder, rattling my teeth. The forest itself seemed to recoil. Trees bent back, branches snapping. The spiral etched in the dirt behind the figure, shattered into jagged lines. The figure screamed, stumbling, its form breaking apart, dissolving into a storm of black fragments. I pulled a third time. The bell's toll rolled like thunder, swallowing everything. The ground shuddered so violently I thought the earth would split open. The figure exploded into a cloud of black ash that scattered on the wind, howling. The spirals collapsed. The faces in the liquid shrieked one last time before bursting into smoke. Silence, and then silence. My hands slipped from the rope. I collapsed onto my back in the grass, chest heaving, every bone aching. The night air was cold but real. The stars had returned, glimmering faintly overhead. The forest was just a forest again. I lay there for what felt like hours, until my breathing steadied, until the ringing in my ears dulled, until I almost convinced myself it was over. But when I finally pushed myself up, when I looked back at the bell tower, I realized something. The bell wasn't swaying anymore. The rope hung still. And yet, deep in my chest, I felt the vibration of a fourth toll. Not in the air, not in the ground, inside me. The sound didn't fade. It lingered. It pulsed in time with my heartbeat. I stumbled back, pressing a hand to my sternum, panic rising again. I could still feel the spiral, not beneath me this time, within me, etched into my ribs, my veins, my marrow. The figure hadn't lied. I hadn't escaped. I had only carried the clearing with me. The bell tower loomed silent, ancient, empty. And in the quiet woods of Appalachia, I realized the worst truth of all. The spiral doesn't end when you leave the clearing. It only follows. The trail back to my RV felt endless. I don't remember walking it, only stumbling through shadows, bruised and cut, my hands still vibrating with the echo of the bell. The forest seemed drained. No whispers, no shadows lurking in the edges of my sight. Just silence, but not peace. The silence felt like a warning, like the pause before lightning strikes. When I finally broke through the tree line, my RV sat waiting where I'd left it. pale under the moonlight, ordinary, domestic, almost absurd in its normalcy after what I'd seen. I stood there for a long while, staring at it, half expecting its windows to ripple like the figure's grin, half expecting the spiral to open beneath its tires and drag it down. But nothing moved. I climbed inside, every step heavy, every nerve raw. The air smelled faintly of coffee and pine from the pot I'd brewed hours. No, days earlier. My watch had stopped. My phone was dead, though I swore I'd charged it before the hike. Time itself felt broken. I turned the ignition. The engine groaned, then hummed alive. The dashboard lights flickered weakly, but enough to show me the gas needle hovering just above empty. I didn't care. I just needed to get out. The gravel crunched under my tires as I rolled down the old forest road. Every bend felt wrong. Every tree leaned too close, but mile by mile I put distance between me and that clearing. The mountains rose behind me like dark walls, and yet, as the road unwound beneath my wheels, the toll of the bell didn't fade. It pulsed steady in my chest, a rhythm I couldn't escape. I turned the radio up, static hissing, but it was still there. I spoke out loud, muttered prayers, cursed into the dark, but it was still there. At some point, my headlights caught movement on the shoulder. A hitchhiker. He was older, beard silver in the beams, a rucksack slung over one arm. He raised a thumb, casual, like men had been doing for 100 years on Appalachian backroads. For a split second, I considered stopping. Maybe out of guilt, maybe out of some desperate need for company after everything. But then the bell throbbed hard in my chest, and I saw his eyes. They weren't reflecting the light. They were absorbing it, deep and dark, with that same stillness as the figure's grin. I pressed the gas, blew past him. My rear view showed nothing. No man, no shadow, no one at all. My throat tightened. The road curved. I kept driving. Dawn came slow, a smear of pale gray leaking over the ridgelines. The world should have felt alive again. Birds should have sung. The mist should have looked soft, not like smoke curling off something burning. I drove until the gas gave out, rolling to a stop near a rest area. My hands shook as I cut the engine. My chest still vibrated faintly, each pulse of the bell synced to my heart. I got out, legs rubber, the asphalt cool under my boots. A trucker nodded to me from the lot, sipping coffee. A family shuffled their kids into the bathroom, normal people living normal lives. For a moment, I almost convinced myself I'd dreamed it, that exhaustion and loneliness had spun some nightmare out of nothing. But then the trucker glanced at me again, brow furrowed, and asked, "You all right, buddy? You look pale." I opened my mouth to answer, to say I was fine, to say I was alive. But what came out wasn't my voice. It was a low, hollow vibration, like a bell struck deep underground. The trucker froze. His coffee cup slipped from his hand, splattering black across the pavement. His face drained, and he backed away slow, never taking his eyes off me. I clutched my chest, stumbling back into the RV, slamming the door behind me. My reflection in the rearview mirror rippled, not breaking, not shattering, just bending, as though the glass itself was afraid to show me what I'd become. I sat there, gripping the wheel until my knuckles ached, until the sun broke fully over the horizon. And that's when I understood. You don't escape places like that. You carry them. The spiral doesn't end in the woods. It etches itself into your blood, your bones, your breath. You can leave the trees, the trails, the towers behind, but the rhythm never fades. And someday when you're tired, when you're lonely, when you're too weak to fight it, it will draw you back. Maybe not to the same clearing, maybe not to the Appalachians at all, but to some forgotten trail, some whispering shadow, some place where the bell waits for another hand to pull its rope. I still drive, still move from campground to campground, rest stop to rest stop. I smile at neighbors, share fires with strangers, trade stories with anyone who will listen. But beneath it all, I feel it. The spiral, the pull, the bell that rings in time with my heart, reminding me with every beat that what waits in the deep woods of Appalachia doesn't let go. And sometimes, when the night is too quiet, when the wind rattles branches against the RV roof, I swear I hear it. A fourth toll, waiting, calling. And I wonder, when I finally answer it, Will I be the one lost, or the one grinning from the tree line, waiting for the next soul to wander too far down a forgotten trail?